Okay, wonderful. I'd like to welcome you all to the Hippy Dippy Roundtable. I think this is the 53rd or 52nd episode recorded on YouTube. Uh, I would like to thank you all for stopping whatever wonderful things you had planned for Friday, like sitting in front of the TV, surfing the internet, or sleeping, and instead doing this. I greatly appreciate it. I am sick at the moment, and so I'm going to ask everybody to show a little extra caution to the rules today because I will be more liberal with the mute button because I don't want to be yelling over all of you. I've also had a little bit of internet trouble, but that should not interrupt you guys from continuing the conversation at any point. Now, let me go over some ground rules. Don't do anything against terms of service. We would all like to keep our jobs and our streams. That applies for both YouTube and Twitch, since some people are streaming on YouTube and some people, including myself, are streaming on Twitch. You are going to respect me when I am talking. When I'm talking, no one else is to be talking. I am talking purely to moderate, not to get involved in the discussion. No attacking people's immutable characteristics. That means race, gender, stuff of that sort. And you will address people by the pronouns they prefer. I don't care what you want on other streams, but that's how the conversation is going to go here. You don't have to agree with it, you just have to do it. Besides that, I think that's most of the rules. Besides the fact that if you find it difficult to get your way into the conversation, one easy trick is to raise your hand. I will write your name down and I will make sure eventually the conversation gets over to you. But please keep that as a last resort, not a first resort. Are there any questions about the rules? No. One last thing, there will be an intro and outro section, meaning for every topic, you'll have a little period of time to say your statement. And during the end of your topic, you have a little period of time to say your statement, uninterrupted completely. So now we're going to get started. More Perfect Union, I can kind of hear some music in the background. Are you playing music by chance?
I am. Let me deaden it to you.
I appreciate it. Okay. So we're going to start with introductions in the top left-hand corner. Cherry.
Hi, I'm Cherry. I stream on Twitch. I do Twitch lore or like reviewing old debates and old dramas. I am very excited to be on the Hippy Dippy for the first time. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you here. Next, I'm going to throw it over to Heem.
Hey, how's it going, Dylan? How's it going, everyone? I'm Heem. I'm the co-host of the Burned Out podcast with Dylan Burns TV. And I just actually put out a video of me reviewing Dylan on Jesse Lee Peterson's podcast. That was interesting. So you can always check that out and you know where to find me.
Okay, next we're going to throw it over to Rob.
Hey, what's up? My name's Rob Norm, a conservative populist. I'm happy to be here on the 5th anniversary, or one day after the 5th anniversary, of a bunch of left-wingers rioting and then getting off and paid by the FBI for doing so because they were unhappy with the guy that won the presidency. Thank you to all the left-wing people for your silence, your accepting of that. So we saw riots the entire way through Trump's administration. Figured we wouldn't be talking about it tonight, so I'd throw it out in my introductions. Happy 5th anniversary of the left-wing's violence.
Okay, now I'm going to throw it over to More Perfect Union.
Hey, everybody. This is the More Perfect Union. I am an occasional Twitch streamer, constitutional conservative. I don't mind talking about things that are reasonable to make improvements to the way our country works, but they just have to work according to the way the Constitution works. And if you don't like the way the Constitution works, my friends, get 2/3 and then 3/4, and we can all talk about it. So anyway, that's me, and I'm looking forward to debating people that I haven't met before. So excellent. Heem, good to see you again.
Okay, now I'm going to throw it over to Preacher.
Hey, Preacher570 on Twitch, variety streamer, a constitutional conservative. Preacher570 pretty much anywhere else on the interwebs. Just looking forward to a good civil debate. I have been married and divorced, so I can yell and scream if I have to. I'd rather not, though. I'd rather a civil discourse. So I'm looking forward to it. Good topics tonight.
Happy to have you here. Somebody turning on the camera. It was Ben. Ben, you can introduce yourself. You were muted.
All right, thanks, Dylan. Yeah, I had my camera off because I was just very quickly eating some Jimmy John's because when I should have been eating dinner, my wife has a cold, and so I was going out to buy some COVID tests, but looks like nobody has the plague, so happy about that. I am a columnist for Jacobin Magazine, a adjunct philosophy professor at Morehouse College here in Atlanta, and the host of Give Them an Argument on YouTube and Give Me an Argument on Colin. And I wrote this book, Christopher Hitchens, What He Got Right, How He Went Wrong, and Why He Still Matters. Was the Kindle version was like the #1 new release in atheism on Amazon, so that was nice to see. Although I do encourage people to buy it from Red Emma's, redemmas.org, which is a worker-owned bookstore in Baltimore. You can order books from online instead of further expanding Jeff Bezos' profit margins.
Wonderful. Now I'm going to throw it over to Rhizome.
Yo, what's up, you guys? Thanks for having me on. I am kind of new to the Twitch politics scene, and Dylan thought that he liked what he saw, so I'm here. I do cozy philosophical and critical discussions with a good dash of cynicism and irony.
He's also a graduate of the Hippy Dippy developmental brand, otherwise known as the Recruitment Show. Now we're going to throw it to last, but most certainly not least, doing us a huge favor and being a last-second replacement for Alex Stein, critically thinking veteran.
Yes, I am critically thinking veteran. You all know who I am, right? I'm, in fact, the people's champion, ready to bring the fucking memes, so I hope you're ready to cream, because tonight, what we're going to try to do is to make him motherfucking scream. Let's fucking go!
Wow. Ben Burgess, not only did you eat the Jimmy John's, but now I can hear it. Wonderful. Okay. So now we're going to go into the first topic, which is Joe Rogan. Is he a fun goof or dangerous disinformation douche? This has to do with the fact that he has been getting a lot of criticism recently around a lot of his COVID takes on one of the most popular podcasts in the world, the Joe Rogan Experience, and has debated a few people on it on his show. And so I'm going to go around the room and let everybody give their takes. I'm going to start with More Perfect Union in the bottom right hand corner.
Joe Rogan, you know, the guy's, he's got a long history in media. I was kind of surprised to see him all fleshed out, doing UFC matches and stuff like that, right? So he's just really kind of into it. He is one of the early guys to get on and do his podcast, and really has a good, solid brand. And he is edgy. I mean, he is the quintessential what would have been in the 60s. Like, oh my God, it's terrible. Lenny Bruce, right? He's out there trying to constantly push the envelope. And I think people would reasonably leave it at that, except he brings on, very controversial people, and he's been very controversial with respect to COVID. And he brought on this guy, Dr. Malone, who has, has some history with mRNA development, has some questions about like mass formation, psychosis, or mass formation, which is like, if people basically see something enough, you keep repeating it, then everybody believes it, right? It's kind of like the big lie concept. But to be honest, right, I mean, the government has told us for, nearly 2 years that everybody's got to get a shot. You got to get a shot. You got to get this. If you get the shot, you're not going to transmit it. You're not going to catch it. You're not going to transmit it. Masks work. Masks don't work. You got to have 1 mask, 2 masks, 42 masks, etc. Right? So if people believe anything, I think it could be problematic if it's not true. But just Louis Brandeis said, the biggest point to all of what we're talking about here is for sunshine to be the best disinfectant and to bring more truth to whatever's going on. So honestly, I don't really have a problem with him. I don't think it's a problem for him to say what he's saying. People just need to come up with better counter arguments. And with that, I'll turn it back over.
Okay, next is going to be Rob Knorr.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Dangerous disinformation douche. Well, he's certainly dangerous. He's dangerous to the corporate media and the establishment Democrats that want to censor anyone who disagrees with them. For example, like the Hunter Biden story, the questions surrounding COVID, other sorts of questions. Can you name me a movement in history that relied on censorship of free speech that we consider a movement that was a moral movement? But that's what we have with the modern day left and the Democratic Party. So yeah, in that sense, he's dangerous to them. He's dangerous to their brand. That's why so much of the establishment is pushing against Joe Rogan, because he's getting more viewership than them. And they don't like that. They can't have that. So they have to find a reason to take him down. The question is, who can decide what disinformation is? Dangerous disinformation. In totality, the mainstream media has more viewership than Rogan. And look how many stories they've got wrong in the recent history. Heck, we had Joe Biden himself, who no doubt has a bigger audience than Joe Rogan. I could bring up videos of him saying, if you get the vaccine, you're not going to get the virus. I feel that many people could contest that that's not the case. That clearly, so is that disinformation? We've seen the establishment, Fauci, the Biden administration, the Democrats, Dr. Birx, Dr. Collins, the CDC, the World Health Organization, change their stance on COVID time after time. Things that we were once told was disinformation that we should be censored for, like saying things like, well, how many people are hospitalized because of COVID and how many people are hospitalized who happen to have COVID? Now we see that's the mainstream talking point from the CDC, now that the Democrats are being blamed with it. We have other things like mass efficacy, natural immunity. All of these things were told to be disinformation that now the mainstream has caught up and changed their story. So no, Joe Rogan is a great man who is open to free speech, and he's funny and he's entertaining and he's willing to hear all sides. And that's exactly why they go after him, not because he's an extremist, but because he's moderate and because many people, including moderate people, are listening to him. And so the authoritarians that must censor information in order to have a stranglehold on the power that they currently have definitely think he's disinformation. It'll be interesting to see if anyone feels that way on this panel as well.
Okay, next is going to be Rhizo.
All right, yeah. My take is pretty simple on this. I think that the question poses a false dichotomy. I think you can be both a fun goof and a dangerous disinformation douche. So for me, the answer is both. I believe that Joe Rogan is a dumbass who has the power to influence other dumbasses to be dumbasses and further entrench them in their dumbass views, which have material effects on reality. Joe Rogan has epistemological flaws with his thinking that he doesn't acknowledge, often doing things like taking the both sides meme, like says some people say this, others say that. So how do we know what's really true? Which for his followers seems like a legitimate way to make conclusions about the world around us, and therefore will lead them to thinking that they have enough knowledge to conclude on something when that knowledge might be fundamentally flawed in a way that they can't detect. Gut instinct, common sense, and experience become the foundation of knowledge and understanding for him and his audience, as though any of those things can tell us about the truth of the world. Joe Rogan, in my opinion, is Dunning-Kruger embodied, and so are his fans.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to Preacher.
Yeah, I think first of all, in order for a person to be a dangerous disinformation douche, they'd have to be talking to people who are either too lazy or too lost to do their own research. Joe Rogan's many things, but a dangerous disinformation douche is not one of them. To be honest with you, he knows who he is. He's already made his financial gains. He's built his own platforms. He has no need to hide. And honestly, I think he's not going to sacrifice his integrity out of fear of cancel culture, almost like the Dave Chappelle thing. You can't cancel me because I don't give a shit. I honestly don't think he definitely takes it to the edge, but I don't think he's a disinformation douche in any way, shape, or form. I think the man speaks his mind. He's a brash fella, and some people don't like that, so I'll leave it at that.
Him?
Okay, so first of all, are we talking about COVID or Joe Rogan? Just to clarify.
Well, it's Joe Rogan, but that's pretty clearly tied to COVID. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that like in general, Joe Rogan and UFC shits, I like it. I like him on UFC, and I think his old stand-ups, they had some like interesting perspectives. I remember one joke specifically that stood out to me was on like an evolutionary joke where he said like that we're obviously come from descendants of apes and stuff, and that if you gave someone a sandwich that was 96% shit and 4% not shit and told them it's not a shit sandwich, that they wouldn't believe you, and that always stuck with me and I liked it. But I think that over time, what made him interesting was having people on of different opinions. And I agree with you guys. One of the ways I was introduced to Joe Rogan was like, I never wanted to watch a whole fucking Ben Shapiro segment, right? But I would watch Ben Shapiro go on Joe Rogan because I wanted to hear the views of the right. It would be a nice way to get a little insight into the rhetoric and the discussions that are going on around, you know, all kinds of different political perspectives. But the problem is his COVID arc has been kind of like his downfall, I think. A lot of people say that that's like he's selling out or grifting or whatever. I don't actually think he is. I think he actually believes what he says. He's a genuine guy. I just think that he's surrounded himself with people who you know, seem to support his positions a lot. And whether that's on purpose or by accident, we'll never really know. I think that in general, he seems like a pretty fun guy, right? And the people that he hangs out with, Alex Jones, that other one, Eddie Bravo, those guys seem like fun guys. Like, nobody wants to hang out with Sam Cedar and go hunting and stuff, but those other guys are actually fun. And that's why I think a lot of it has to do with just like, he doesn't really care. He wasn't that political of a guy. He was just a guy who was interested in many different things. And now it's kind of like he's fell into this trap a little bit. I think that like his disinformation is a problem, but I think in general, that's a problem with a lot of independent media in general, and, you know, some corporate media as well. Some of the guys said that like mainstream media got lots of stories wrong. I don't think they get them wrong at the time. It might be that a certain story about, let's say, masks or something changes, but I don't think that you know, they're specifically getting it wrong, like Joe Rogan making mistakes because he can't check it in real time.
Ben Burgess.
Yeah, for the record, I would go hunting with Sam. But otherwise, I pretty much agree with him. I think Joe Rogan is a very mixed bag. You know, his views have always been a little all over the place. You know, that he can have you know, Jordan Peterson on, you know, one week, and, you know, he kind of like nods along with everything he says, and he can have Cornel West on another week, and he pretty much nods along with everything he says. And some of that's just being a good host, but I mean, some of it is that I think he tends to, you know, I do think he's an earnest guy. I think he tends to often, you know, kind of be taken with whatever somebody is saying, sort of in the moment. I think that he is like a lot of people in that I don't think that he spends the biggest chunk of his time thinking about politics. Oftentimes, people who don't really, you know, watch or listen to the Joe Rogan Experience assume that he does, but I think he cares, you know, more about, you know, comedy and mixed martial arts and you know, psilocybin mushrooms and half a dozen other things, you know, than he does about politics. And that means that, like a lot of you know, like a lot of regular people, he has, you know, he doesn't fixate on things. Like, he's not enough of a political obsessive like all of us to have his like various impulses to have like gelled together into a coherent worldview. I do think that COVID has brought out his worst. I don't think it's surprising, because one of the things that I've always liked least about his weird mixture of views is that he's always been very prone to conspiracy theories. That was, you know, that's true as long as I've known who he. I mean, Joe Rogan's character on news radio was kind of into conspiracy theories, and I think that was kind of already sort of a reference to, you know, the man himself. So I don't think it's that surprising. I think it's unfortunate, but I also think that the left tends to make a little bit of a mistake with Rogan. I remember the late Michael Brooks saying this to me once, that like it seems like sort of getting mad at him and going after him for the stuff that he's wrong about, rather than playing up the stuff that he's right about, might be a tactical mistake. That, you know, I mean, things I've seen Joe Rogan say. He has a wonderful rant you can find on YouTube. Just look for Joe Rogan Team Human, where he's talking about the Trump administration's barbaric immigration policies, and says that if you don't have a problem with this, you're not on Team Human. He has, you know, there's a wonderful segment that he did with Dave Rubin, where he just thoroughly embarrassed Rubin on the post office and why it would be a disaster if it was privatized. and why we absolutely need safety regulations and can't just leave that stuff to the free market. That was a work of art. His segment with Dan Crenshaw, where Crenshaw was arguing against Medicare for all in these sort of goofy ways, that socialism, it's slavery, and Rogan had some like very good common sense responses to that, and was like very unswayed by it and kind of appropriately making fun of it. I like that, and so I would I prefer to I don't disagree that some of his positions on COVID are I don't think they're right. I tend to I tend to believe I tend to think that the consensus of epidemiologists, which is often badly translated by politicians like Biden, but has always been, for example, that vaccines make it dramatically less likely that you'll get sick rather than 0% likely. I tend to believe that rather than taking taking it from some of Rogan's more dubious guests. But I still think the best approach to Rogan is to play up the good stuff rather than fixated on yelling at him for the bad stuff.
Okay, wonderful. Cherry.
I'm going to probably more so align with him on here. I think that Joe Rogan is just like a funny goof who also like spreads misinformation. But I think somebody like that needs to exist in the media or like on the internet, because most people in this world are like really confident in their stupidity and just like all the way misinformed, and they should see that representation.
And CTV.
All right, Chad. We all know what's going on, okay? So let me kind of lay it out for the panelists because they don't understand what's going on, all right? This is what you're about to see. One, Rob is about to take the lead on the right, swiftly backed up by MPU and Preacher, right? That's going to be a strong trio to be able to try to defeat tonight, okay? So since we understand this, what you're going to see CTV doing tonight is being more of the strategic motherfucking nuke, right? So it's a 4-on-3 match from the start, right? And if I need to hit that fucking steel chair, chat, I'm going to be right there with it. I'm going to be right there with it, right? That's why I'm the people's champ. People's champ. So 4-on-3 match tonight. Rhizome, Cherry, Heem, and Ben Burgess, right? They're going to be coming. They're going to be trying to make the arguments. We're going to see what happens. We're going to see if it gets to the point where that steel chair gets knocked right upside somebody's metaphorical head. If not, what we know we're going to see is one hell of a 4-3 fight. You know what I'm saying? So, that in mind, chat, rest assured I'm watching the same conversation as you, and I'm trying to put it in where I can to make y'all laugh. All right, let's go.
Wonderful. It's now open for open discussion. Try to keep it down an octave or two.
Can I ask? Somebody said it was MPU. Do you really think that Joe Rogan is today's equivalent of Lenny Bruce?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I mean, but I think, God, Ben, in Ben's opening, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we're
okay.
good.
In Ben's opening, right, he said, look, he's got good points, he's got bad points, you should play up the good and just sort of shit can the bad, right? That's not bad logic to apply to like everybody, right? You don't have to agree with what the guy says. I mean, I look, he said he was going to support Bernie Sanders, right? He brought Bernie Sanders on, and the left just fucking loved the hell out of that, right? He was talking him up. He got his policies out. He said, you know what? I'm going to vote for you. Okay, so there are things that the guy does. He's a comedian. He's an entertainer, okay? And he's bringing people on that make other people think shit, right? And if you don't like the shit that he's trying to make you think, then that's fine. If you've got counters, bring the counters, or encourage him to bring other people the counters on, or watch other shit, right? I mean, the bottom line is he's just an entertainer, just like you, just like the rest of us, to the limited extent that anybody watches.
For sure, but I just mean like when I guess like Lenny Bruce was before my time, so but from the little that I know about Lenny Bruce, he was like pushing the boundary and he was like pushing the boundary and getting like arrested because he was talking about like sexual things on stage and
Yeah, he was
Yeah,
using
well,
the swear
so it's different that Joe Rogan's not in danger of getting arrested. What happened is we could see that with cultural institutions and things like that, they might not be as ham-fisted sending police after people now, but there's certainly a big push to censor Rogan, right, from people in positions of power. There's certainly a big push to get him removed from Spotify and to challenge Spotify and to force them to get removed. So I understand what More Perfect Union's saying in theory, that both are comedians who the culture that was dominant at the time sought to shut them up by applying pressure that would affect them financially, and in the case of Lenny Bruce, with his freedom.
Can I ask you? Okay, let's say Joe Rogan.
If I could add just.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Sorry, if I could just add one quick thing to it, Heem, that I think will help fill it out a little bit more. Everybody remembers how bad the left was anti Nancy Reagan's, just say no campaign, right? All of that stuff. It was a big problem. They went after people. They were about violence, about the gaming industry and stuff like that, right? Everybody on the left was just like nuts crazy for it, right? So it's possible, depending on who happens to have the dominant view or the dominant view in power, in political power, that whatever they don't like, is naturally opposed by everybody else in society, or a large chunk of people in society. And I think that that's just kind of what we're seeing, right? Rogan is bringing up some points that the dominant power theory thinks is bad, and that's why they want to call it misinformation. Instead of saying, you know what, Rogan brought on a guest who said X, let's bring a guest on somewhere else who can answer what was said, not just say the guy was full of shit.
Can I ask you guys? Okay, I want to ask the righties. Do you guys, let's say Joe Rogan came out and was like, yeah, I'm having this guy on who published a paper once who's actually trying to tell us how insulin doesn't work. And he spends 3 hours explaining how insulin is actually a fake drug and it's not effective and it's actually going to harm you. Would you guys then say like, okay, this is settled, like he's harming people with this? Or do you hold the same position regardless of what it is?
No. Yeah. I hold the same position regardless.
Let me push it farther. Let's say there was a radioactive spill and the government comes out and says there's radiation in the air and you're getting exposed heavily above any sort of dose that you can handle. And Joe Rogan comes on and says, nah, I don't feel it on my skin. I think we should chill and like wait. Do you guys think then would you like? I'm wondering, is there any line? No.
There is no line. Let me ask the counter question to you, Heem. You do a show with Dylan Burns. If you, as a host, bring someone on and they say some things that are harmful to whatever, like, should you then be labeled a dangerous disinformation douche and have people calling for the canceling of your show?
Well, I mean, first of all, the show that I host with Dylan is mostly memes. But I mean, yeah,
I've been on a panel you hosted.
If I do it repetitively and like, and there's a pattern and I don't recognize that, like, hey, listen, someone came on and maybe spread misinformation, then I think
how about instead of hypotheticals, if we point out what he actually did say.
Right, give us the disinfo.
Yeah. Well, the reason I'm bringing up
can I just
go ahead. Sorry.
A quick question here. So, Rob, I think, said two things, right? Labeled a dangerous disinformation douche and have people call for him to be like censored from Spotify or whatever, right? So, like, I understand your view is that he is to some extent a dangerous disinformation douche. Can't say that phrase without laughing. But do you think, right, that he should be like kicked off of Spotify or whatever? Because that seems like a very different issue to me.
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
No, I don't. I don't think that he should be. I just think that like it's good to.
I didn't think so, but the way he put it sounded like.
I think it's good to like. I think it's good to critique people. Like the same way we critique. I used to critique fucking Cuomo when he was on CNN because he would bring on his brother and softball. You guys remember he had the big Q-tip and he's like, your nose is so big, you have to use this baseball bat Q-tip. Yeah. And I thought
that was Mom's favorite.
Yeah, I criticized him for that. So I think that, like, just because we like these people or, whatever, it doesn't mean that they're, like, above criticism.
And that's why I was saying earlier, like, they're only disinformation and dangerous if you're not doing your own research. Like, I know a lot of it has to do with what he said about ivermectin. Well, if people listen to him and then they go out and do what people are actually doing, getting that over the counter version that was killing people. Well, that's stupidity. Why didn't you do your own research? Just because Joe Rogan is not God, he's a good
Hey,
guy.
preacher, this might be news to you, but people are stupid, dog, and they need to know how to discern good information from bad information.
Well,
and I don't trust people to do their own medical research.
Is this
And
really
I
do
don't
your own research argument here? Like, if you were going to just hear somebody on a podcast tell you to get ivermectin, like, your research wasn't ever going to be your thing.
If you do your own research, you'll come to the conclusion that vaccines are the way to go. You know, like the vast majority of literature leads.
If I may
step in, answer that they agree to.
Doesn't mean
All they
I'm
do when they listen to
research.
Joe.
Okay.
If I may step.
Let's quiet down for a moment. Multiple people were talking at once. So far, was there anybody who hasn't talked yet that was talking? I think everybody's talked so far. Rhizome, you've talked the least except for this one sentence you just said, so I'll give it to you. Then Rob, then Preacher, that order.
Yeah, I mean, obviously people should do their own research, but people aren't capable of that. That's why we have scientific agencies who we trust to do that kind of research and peer review it. And we have global research at this point that speaks to a very similar conclusion about what is good and what is not for COVID practices, right? The big problem that I have right now with the way that we're talking is the people on the right are acting like disinformation is politically aligned, and disinformation is just bad information. Can we agree on that, or are we just going to talk about conspiracies all night that everything correct is coming from the left just because that's what the mainstream media wants you to think?
No, everything correct's coming from the establishment. The left happens to dominate the establishment.
Okay, so we're just going to talk about conspiracies all night, Rob? You can't agree that disinformation is not politically aligned in and of itself?
No, I don't understand what the question is. I understand that
it's a pretty simple question.
Right, let me tell you why. If you let me finish there, Rhizome, I'll explain what I mean.
Hey, whenever you start yelling, like Franklin, nobody hears you, right?
Yeah.
If CTV has to quiet us down, we're doomed, okay?
Yeah, I'll give you.
It ain't like I don't have a lot of experience with doing the shit, right? So
I'll give you the simple version, Rob.
You know,
is disinformation a partisan issue, or is it something that can happen from the right and the left?
Disinformation can happen on both sides, but the way people define disinformation, particularly the ones that want to censor people or to critique people on it, what they mean by disinformation is things that I disagree with or things that I think are wrong. Because, for example,
who are these people? Are they just who you've experienced online?
Are you going to keep interrupting?
When you say some dumbass shit, yeah.
If I interrupted you every time you said dumbass shit, you might as well take a seat from the panel. Why don't you go back to the minor leagues and leave the big boys talk, you fucking worthless bum. Now, anyways, if I can finish up here, disinformation, for example, we were told, for example, first by the people in charge, like the CDC, Dr. Fauci in February, that the flu was going to be worse than COVID. That's what the director of the CDC and Dr. Fauci was saying in February 2020. There were people online that were called conspiracy theories that said, no, COVID's going to be really bad. Many of them that came from the right. Those were called dangerous disinformation people. Then we had people that were saying things like, wait a minute, we shouldn't just count cases because some people are counting as COVID cases, but they went to the hospital with a sprained ankle. They happened to test them. They were asymptomatic, but it counted as a COVID case. So we need to find out how many people are hospitalized or dying because of COVID versus how many are dying and who happen to have COVID. That was called dangerous disinformation. We now find out real quick. Please, I let everyone else speak. No, wait, I was saying dumbass shit. The point I'm trying to make, and we could keep going on and on, with all of the things that we were told that was dangerous disinformation and that you were literally censored from places like YouTube for saying, we actually find out was now true, and now people in positions of power, when it would harm the Democrats to admit otherwise, it was called dangerous disinformation when people like me said that governors were withholding information on how many people died in nursing homes thanks to Democratic governors' disastrous policy to force nursing homes to take COVID patients. I was told over and over I was a conspiracy theorist for that. Now we know that that was true. So the question I have is this: what exact disinformation did Joe Rogan himself spread? What and secondly, and I'll just say this real quick. Even if no one on this panel is calling for his censorship, that's great. But let's not act like the president of the United States hasn't said that it's incumbent on these companies to stop disinformation. He just said it in his speech. And now we see people following suit and saying that Joe Rogan should be censored. So even if you're not saying it here, that's what people in positions of power are doing.
Okay.
All right. So can I respond since it was directed towards me?
Sure. And then we're going to have you respond, and anybody wants to respond directly to that, then we got to go back to the list, which now is Preacher and MP on it.
Cool. So, Rob, you first said that when people like you were saying things that are now proven to be true, it was dangerous disinformation. That's right, because you didn't have the epistemological foundation to know what was a reasonable claim to actually make and to conclude on. Scientific understanding evolves over time, my friend. We don't believe in geocentrism anymore. It's pretty straightforward. And no matter how much you clap and look like a clown right now, it's not really going to help your point.
Real quick, if I could respond real quick, I just wonder. Okay,
can you respond to both of us?
Sure,
I'm going to
it'll be
respond to
easy.
your initial
Yeah.
point too. You were bringing up the COVID flu thing. Are we still on this? Like, obviously, the reason that COVID was mitigated was because we wore masks, we social distanced, we had lockdowns. Are we still doing this? Like, you're going to compare flu numbers from when everybody was walking around making out and shit to COVID restrictions?
Team, do you even understand what I said? I said that the people in positions of power in February of 2020, like Dr. Fauci said, don't be worried about COVID. The flu will be worse.
Wait, one sec. How would they know that? How would they know?
So you're saying that they were spreading dangerous disinformation and they didn't know?
No, I'm saying what Rhizome just said, which is science evolves.
So
how would they know the final answer?
Great question. So show me the data that they were looking at that came to that conclusion. Good point. Right.
The data
The
they were
problem
looking at was
is okay. Now I'll respond to Rhizome because he didn't really say much
Yeah,
there.
sure, go ahead.
So I'll respond to him. Like the problem is what you're doing is cheering for authoritarianism and censorship of all counter information. So for example, the same argument you're making now, almost every foreign policy expert said we should go to the Iraq war. Almost every single one. And people like me, we didn't have access to whether or not there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So we were dangerous disinformation people, even if we were right, because we should have bowed down to the experts because they had done their research. This is so juvenile and it's such an argument for authoritarianism. And basically what you're saying is that the science is infallible, that we have to trust them no matter what. And even if we show over and over again, predictably, that they were wrong, saying things like, oh, it couldn't have came from a lab, or natural immunity isn't that good, or it's okay to send these patients to nursing homes, that we just need to shut up. Now, wasn't the whole point here, just let me clarify, everyone's stance on the left here was, well, we're not saying we're censoring Joe Rogan, but there's room for criticism. Isn't that what you all said?
No, I didn't even mention censorship in my answer.
Right. So I said that you're
introduction.
not saying that, none of you are saying he should be censored. You're just saying that he should be criticized, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so then now Rhizome's argument is, but even if you end up being right, it's still disinformation if you speak out, and dangerous if you're criticizing the scientist or disagreeing with the scientist in positions of power. So it's okay to criticize Joe Rogan, but not the scientist. We can't criticize them.
If at the time it's wrong, then what are you going to do?
What are you talking about if at the time it's wrong?
you-
Who determines
you
if
just
something's
happen-
right or wrong? This
data
view of
that's
science,
available-
real quick, this view of science that we just have to listen to a few people that call themselves scientists and no one else can
They don't
challenge
call
them.
themselves scientists.
They're not a few
They don't
people.
call. Wait one sec. No one is calling themselves scientists.
no,
They're
you
going
guys-
through the educational
wait.
process to get
Too
their
far.
certification required to become
Dr.
scientists.
Fauci said attacks on him are literally attacks on science. And I don't care, fine. We can say then people that
What
have
does that,
gone to
wait, one
university.
sec. What does that have to do with you saying that people are calling themselves scientists
Well,
as though they're not scientists?
I'm not implying that they're calling themselves scientists, that they're not scientists. I'm saying that we have this cast of people that we put a label on, that we say we could only listen to them, and other people aren't allowed to have
They
a
went
say.
to school
Sheen,
for-
please be quiet. But they were wrong over and over. But they were wrong over and
I've been
over.
in school, Rob. I've been in school for radiation physics for 10 years.
Wait,
You,
okay. CDV heard me, and he acted like an attack dog there, and I appreciate it. Okay, so I'm gonna have him say what he's trying to say, and then we're going to move on to Preacher and PU. And I saw Cherry was trying to get something out, so I'll try to bring it around to Cherry. Him?
Dylan, I hope you feel better, buddy. Listen, all I'm saying is you're acting as though going through the process of getting a scientific degree and going into getting a PhD and publishing papers is so easy and like anybody can do it. There's so much groundwork that goes into place. Of course, they would have the authority on this shit. They've been in school for it. I've been in school for 10 years learning radiation physics. Obviously, I know more than you guys know.
So
Like,
same
what
with
do you
foreign
mean?
policy,
So-
correct? People that went to school to be foreign policy experts, we can't trust
It's
them,
not
correct?
the same at all.
Why?
Foreign policy and science are completely different. You think they're the same?
It's the same that
Wait,
both-
is it the same?
It is the same in the way that I'm talking about it, which is saying that because someone has an expertise that we can't challenge them.
Do you think that the scientific process and the process by which someone becomes a foreign policy expert are the same in terms of how sure they can be with their conclusions?
No, explain to
think
me
what
the
Rob's trying
scientific.
to say
Explain
is
to me
that-
the scientific process. Why don't you explain the difference? What is the scientific process? Explain it to me.
The science, what you want me to, where should I start? You start with a hypothesis and then you come up with an independent variable and then a null hypothesis and then you try to figure out what you're like. Where do you want me to start?
So you're saying that
Can I
you
step in
test
here for a moment?
hypothesis real quick. So you're saying that you test hypothesis, and yet it's disinformation for people that want to test these scientists by testing their claims, even when they end up being right and the scientists were
You
wrong.
listen. Wait 1 sec. So I have no problem with scientists critiquing other scientists, okay? Which has been done. A lot of these guys that go on Joe Rogan's show, later on, actual scientists go through their work and figure out whether or not they're actually being accurate or not and critique it in a scientifically responsible way. That I'm 100% cool with. I'm not saying that the data that Fauci goes off of or whatever is like 100% true. If you want to critique it, go get an undergrad degree, then get a master's, then get a PhD. I'm serious.
That's what
Then
Dr.
you'll have the
Malone did.
requisite knowledge.
That's what
Then you'll
Dr.
have the
Malone did.
requisite knowledge.
That's
Then
what
you'll have
Dr.
the
Malone
requisite
did.
knowledge to
Dippy.
critique
Dr.
it.
Malone's a doctor, right? He went through this process. Who are you to criticize
Dr.
him?
Malone is
Real quick,
wait 1 sec.
who are you to
Dr.
criticize
Malone
him?
is-
He's
hang
a
on, I'll
doctor.
answer it. He's a doctor, but he wrote a book called some shit about mass psychosis.
Hey, you're not a
He went to
scientist. You
school
can't
for
criticize
chemistry.
him. You can't criticize him. You're not a doctor. He went to school for science. He knows the scientific process. No
If
one
I
on
go
here
to
can
school for
criticize
physics,
Dr. Malone.
if I
No
go
one
to
can
school for
criticize him.
physics and then I come out and write a book about relationships, I can't say, hey, listen, I'm a doctor.
He developed the mRNA. He developed the
What does that have
mRNA
to do with the
vaccine.
mass psychosis shit that he wrote about?
What does that have to do? We're talking about when it comes to mass psychosis. We're not
What
even
I'm
talking.
saying is he has a political.
please,
He has a
please.
political.
Please.
he has
Heem,
a
you gotta let him
political
finish. Heem, you
meaning.
gotta let him finish. You gotta let him
Please.
finish. You ask the question.
We're literally sitting on a panel with a bunch of people that want to call Joe Rogan a disinformationist. And he's saying the reason for that is, and I think Rhizome too, is because we can't have non-scientists criticizing scientists. And yet that's exactly what they're doing. So they themselves, by their own definition, can't criticize Dr. Malone when he's talking about the, who do you think's better to
I
speak
don't.
on?
I don't. There are
real quick,
scientists
let
who
me
have
finish.
critiqued him.
Let me finish. There are scientists that critique the scientists that like Dr. Fauci too. So it's not just no-name people like me that are criticizing him that happen to be right. It's also actual doctors that were criticizing him being censored as well. The point is, you can see, as I said in my opening, they'll just call disinformation whatever they believe is wrong. And so they can say, they can criticize who should speak more on vaccines than the guy that created the mRNAs. Who's more qualified, him and Rhizome or Dr. Malone?
Hang on. You think Dr. Malone created mRNA?
He was literally on the patent as the name that wrote the paper that was the first name that was on the paper that created it.
Created what?
The mRNA vaccines.
So he had a small part to play in the
What part
lipid
did you have to
formation
play?
of the delivery.
What part did you play?
Me?
Yeah.
I go by scientific consensus.
Oh,
I'm telling you, I go by
so
scientific
you're allowed to
consensus.
criticize a scientist even though you're not one.
I go by the criticisms of actual scientists who have critiqued him.
Yeah, right.
I
So
don't
I
come
was
up with the
also going by the
criticisms myself.
criticism of scientists that were critiquing Dr. Fauci and the CDC. There were also doctors
So
and
why do you
scientists
hang
critiquing
on?
him.
So let me ask you, why do you go by the minority and not the majority?
They were right
What?
because they were right.
How do you know that?
Without
You're
having
get-
a retrospective look, when you're getting information, how do you decide to go with the minority opinion over the majority opinion?
Because
Gut
I
feel?
looked at their arguments and their
feel?
data, and it was
Dangerous
more
place,
accurate
dude.
to me.
More
It is.
accurate.
It is. Hang on a second.
So we
It
gotta
is
make-
But they were right, Rhizome. Weren't they?
Hey, Dylan's talking, y'all.
Okay.
Dylan's talking.
So,
Hush.
It's gonna be Preacher next. He's been waiting patiently. Then it's gonna be MPU after people have responded to Preacher, and we'll keep going down the list. Cherry, I know you raised your hand after all
They're
of them.
probably not going to respond to me because I'm going to be exactly right on everything I say, and they won't have any response. But that's okay. I understand. I think part of the problem is that, and maybe this is what Rob was touching on, is that the government has their set of scientists that they rely on, and that they're the ones we have to get the information from. And we've seen other doctors, other scientists saying something from the other side. And well, that's disinformation because that's not the ones appointed by the government. But you got to listen to both sides and then try to find in the middle what the hell is going on. And to sit here and say that, by the way, I am not a scientist. I have done experiments in the kitchen with food, but that's not science, I guess. It just makes me fat. But I do critique them if I find someone who has a more understandable, more reasonable paper put out. I mean, to say it's because, well, they're the minority doesn't matter. The majority isn't always right. We can't go by that. We've got to look at all the facts and everything. But when it comes down to it, what I really wanted to talk about earlier was Sherry had said something about listen to the podcast when you're not doing research. I listen to podcasts all the time, whether it's Joe Rogan or Ben Shapiro, anybody, I don't take any of their word for gold. Even Steven Crowder will say, don't take what I say for golden. Do the research, fact check me. If we're not willing to fact check, then I don't know. We're lost on stuff. So to sit here and say, oh, well, Joe Rogan's this because he said that. Listen, the guy said something. He talked to doctors who had used these, I'm not going to say their names, but these prescriptions on other people, and they have worked. I mean, it worked, so he used it, and everybody came down on him. He also talked about the monoclonal antibodies, the azithromycin, the vitamin drip, but the only thing they tripped on was the ivermectin, and it's a horse dewormer, and they had to go with all that. They just wanted to shoot him down. That's ridiculous. At least listen to what he has to say. Listen to what other doctors have to say, because not one doctor, especially Anthony Fauci, are going to be 100%, especially when they haven't been practicing forever. He's just taking words from other people. We have to listen to everybody, not just the majority. We have to listen to them all and hear all the voices. But now I'm 100% correct on everything. Nobody has anything to say to me, so I'll pass on to MBU.
Look, the whole concept of what disinformation is and what the potential damages are, I think we can objectively look at what is being said, what information is being brought out, and we can question it, and then we can determine, okay, through discourse, through dialogue, through discovery, we can determine whether or not something is actually true or not, or likely than not to be true, or more likely than not to be false. And then we can advance and we can move forward, right? We can apply the scientific method to that, but you have to be able to question, okay, the status quo first of all, right? For thousands of years, people thought the Earth was flat. They thought that the sun revolved around the Earth. Okay, it took a minority of people, Columbus sailing the ocean blue, okay, to believe that you could get to the other side of the Earth by going in the wrong direction. Okay, and nobody believed him. Okay, Galileo was branded a heretic for his beliefs. Okay, so you can't say that just because the majority believes in any fucking thing.
Do you think the scientific method has changed at all?
Stop. I'm not going to get into a fucking argument.
You're going to go back to Galileo?
You can respond. No, God,
like his time, Raheem. Calm down.
What I'm simply
got me singing
saying,
Queen.
that people question science all the fucking time, and they weren't necessarily fucking scientists, right? The idea of being able to have more speech to have more speech in order to frame the conversation in a better way is a better path forward than simply saying, I disagree with him, so let's fucking deplatform him, let's demonetize him, let's do this shit that seems almost exclusively to come out of the left. And by the way, since we're talking about fucking disinformation, what about the 4 years of disinformation that Adam Schiff and the fucking Democrats did about Russian fucking collusion? That's bullshit. You can't have it both fucking ways, guys.
Okay. Keem, did you want to say anything particular before we go to Cherry then Ben?
I mean, I just think that, like, if you guys, you don't need to go back to Galileo. The scientific process in the last 100 years has been insanely impressive. Look how much advancements we've made in technology and science. Like, how are you guys going to start doubting these people who have literally, like, the amount of advancement we've had in the last 100 years is unfathomable. Fucking 20, 30 years ago, we couldn't even imagine having iPhones.
This is exactly
wrong.
Like, come on. What you're saying is exactly
they're going to
the
go
opposite.
to the hospital once they get COVID too, you know?
Are you making fun of Dylan because he has COVID? Is that what you're doing? That's
yeah,
fucked up.
He's making fun of Dylan. Dylan, he's making fun of you.
Oh, no, he's making fun of other people. Dylan has COVID. Hey, Dylan, do you think that's cool? Making fun of cheering that people get COVID? You think that's cool? Fucking asshole. Anyways, I'll finish my point.
Wow. Well, how are you going to ask the question and not wait for a fucking answer? I want to hear the answer, Dylan.
I believe now that I have COVID, I am part of the inferior race. And so now I just take the beating. That's just how it works.
If I could respond to him real quick. Every scientific process that we've seen, almost every single one using the scientific method, started with a minority of scientists. Every time that we change something that we understand scientifically, it's because most scientists think one thing, and then someone has a hypothesis and test it, and they say, actually, now we have a better understanding. We've even done this as early as Einstein. We say, oh, everyone thought Einstein was right on the theory of relativity and, E equals MC squared, all the stuff that he was talking about, but other scientists scientists have came along and said, actually, he was wrong about this one particular thing, or we could adjust it, we could modify it because he wasn't right. What that took was everyone had an understanding he was right, or almost everyone, a minority changed it, just like with Galileo.
Okay. So what you're saying is that it's a collaborative process, right? That it takes time to build upon a foundation. First, you figure out, oh, hey, maybe this will work in bacteria. Then later, oh, hey, you have to find a delivery mechanism. And all of these step by step have to have their papers published, reviewed, looked at, and so on and so forth, right? Dr. Malone's article was published in 1987. Okay. Since then, we've come a long way in developing the mRNA vaccine. Why are you shaking your head? What's the shake your head about?
Your ideology is that anyone who's not a scientist, and even scientists, that we should only listen to the majority. Then when I give you examples that every major scientific discovery has been started with a minority, you're like, yeah, but Dr. Malone wrote a paper a long time ago.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that if a scientist came out with a critique of the mRNA vaccine, okay, that was valid, that they would, because they were in the minority, that other scientists wouldn't look at that and be like, oh, hey, like this is something to look at?
No, I
think that pressure for people not to do that.
Sorry, say that one more time.
I believe that that's exactly what's happening to a lot of people. People are coming out and they say, why has nobody looked at, seriously, critically looked at? Okay,
they can look at the paper
until just very recently. They were actually saying, no, that's misinformation.
When you say why don't they, can I ask you, when they say why don't they look at, how do you propose they look at it? They have to first convince a population to not do the lockdown.
I have the answer. I have the anscer. First off,
look at it, review it. You couldn't even get them funded.
Wait.
Hey guys.
Okay, so, we're gonna have. Okay, could you ask the question again? So then we have one person respond, then we have to move to the rest of the.
I can answer in 5 seconds.
Okay.
Have Pfizer release the data?
What data?
Their trials. They won't release their trials.
What data do you want? What
they
data?
did.
What exactly? What exactly?
Heem, if you'd shut up, I'll tell you. They had trials on the safety and the effects of their vaccines, and they won't release them for over 50 years. Okay, so how can scientists look at that?
Wait, I think Moderna released it before. I think Moderna released it when they had 400,000 people in their phase 3 trials. They released the data. I looked at the data.
Now, I don't believe that they've released that Moderna, Pfizer, or any of them have released the entire data.
What data are you looking for specifically when you say the data? What are you looking for?
What their data was that they found when they tested it versus placebos.
What metrics? What metrics?
You won't shut your fucking mouth, so you don't know. What's the matter? I'm giving you the metrics. The data they had on the efficacy of how much it worked versus placebos, the data that they had versus side effects and things like that. Would you shut the fuck up, Heem? It has not been released. No, it hasn't.
That's been released. Yes, it has.
Post it.
Post it. Order.
Stop. There's a disagreement. You guys can post links in the Discord if you want to. We got to move to other people.
I want to write a strongly pointed letter.
Okay. Well,
yeah, I found it right now. I'm gonna link it to you.
Sure.
Link it in chat. We're moving it on to Cherry. It is Cherry next and Ben.
I don't know what to say now. I wanted to respond to like Rob earlier when he realizes nobody on this panel is saying that Joe Rogan is to get canceled. But he's upset that people will criticize Joe Rogan for criticizing other people. And that's absurd to me because I don't think that I have to just sit there and swallow the fact that you put like a burly dude on a podcast and I'm supposed to give a fuck about what he thinks. Like, just think about it logically. Somebody who is like, let's say, criticizing a book who hasn't read the book, like, should I do anything but make fun of him?
Have you read did you what? Let me ask you this. First off, I'm not saying
just the concept. Just the
Cherry,
concept of somebody who.
Right. Let me answer.
Okay.
So, Cherry, first off, I'm not saying you don't have the right to criticize. I hope you do criticize. That's fine. What I'm saying is, when we say disinformation, the people that are saying that are people that say just shit that I disagree with. And second, we can't look at this in a vacuum. Although I respect no one here wants Rogan canceled, we literally hear from the President of the United States all the way down, people in positions of power that are advocating censoring disinformation on COVID. And I myself have had videos removed on COVID and things like that. And most of the stuff that I talked about, I wasn't even shit. I'm even for vaccines. I'm just against the mandate, right? Most of the shit I was talking about that I was getting censored for, almost all of it ended up being true. Let me further say this to Heme and to Rhizome, right? It was scientific consensus at one point, right? According to a Lancet article and 47 scientists, that there was no possible way, it was debunked, that the virus could have came from a lab in China, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
That's not, wait, one sec, hang on. Do you think that's like,
let him go down his line of questioning?
No, but one sec. Do you think that
let him make the point? Let him make his point.
That's it. Okay. That's my point. Go ahead, Heme.
Okay.
My point is that that's not the hypothesizing about where the origins of the virus came from are not as scientifically rigorous as the creation of the mRNA vaccine and testing it.
It still are people that are talking about that. Your argument would seem to be that the only people who could speak on things about the virus and the conversation of where the virus came from had to do with looking at the actual, like, I don't know what you would call it, like the diagnosis of the virus, like ACE2 receptor sites, spike proteins, furin cleavage sites, things like this, things that me and you aren't scientists. So when the scientists looked at that, it was a consensus. There's no way this could have came from a lab in Wuhan. Then we found out that the guy, Peter Daszak, that wrote the letter that the 47 scientists signed on to, that literally you would be sent, Dr. Fauci agreed with, and you could get censored online for saying it came from a lab. Turned out Peter Daszak not only knew it was possible that gain of function could have happened in that lab, but he was the one doing it. And so
no because one was there to know. How could they know? You're talking about a prediction about how the origin.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Know that
the guy that said that it couldn't have happened was literally being paid by our government to do it.
But what I'm saying is the going back and figuring out where the origin came from is a completely different scientific process to originating and creating a vaccine and testing it and so on. That one is way more rigorous than the other.
I mean, it's what you can see here. Anyone can see is that they'll constantly shift the goalpost, constantly shifting of the goalpost in order to say, like, this is why we get to control what is disinformation and why no one other than the people we want should be allowed to speak on it. And every time you could be like, well, what about this situation where the majority of scientists said one thing on COVID and it was wrong? He'll say, well, that was different. It wasn't quite the same. Well, what about this one? Well, that was different. It wasn't quite the same. Meanwhile, he's criticizing a doctor who was one of the people that developed. By the way, I disagree with Dr. Malone on a lot of what he said. I also don't understand, just because if we disagree with Dr. Malone, why that means that Joe Rogan, a guy who brought a guest on, is any more responsible as being a disinformation agent.
Because Dr. Malone acts like he's the be-all and end-all of the mRNA vaccine. He literally goes around claiming that he was the creator of the mRNA vaccine when he had one small part in a massive collaborative effort over a 30-year span to create the vaccine.
Why are you criticizing?
I'm going to be honest. Between the two of you, I want to throw it back to Cherry because she didn't really get a chance to speak. Okay,
I can manage the guests, but Cherry, do you have anything more to say?
No, Dylan, you can log out, bro. Just go take a nappy, okay? CTV's got this.
I appreciate it. Cherry, do you have anything else to say before I throw it over to Ben?
I just want to remind everyone that this topic was about Joe Rogan, and clearly Rob Nar came here on a fucking mission with COVID.
Okay. Ben?
I didn't even... You fucking idiots.
Oh, I'm sorry, what?
I said you fucking idiots. Plural.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay.
No, yeah, but I'm one person, so just direct that either at me.
Okay, you are a fucking idiot, as is Heman Rhizome. Good?
Okay, why? Why?
Because what the statement you just made, that I was the one turning it into COVID, when every single person on here, including Dylan, the moderator, said, obviously this has to do with COVID because that's where people started saying that he was disinformation.
Being misinformation on his podcast.
On COVID.
That was whatever the fuck.
Okay, so then real quick, Cherry, can you give me the examples you're talking about? Can you give me the examples that you're talking about of disinformation that you're upset about Joe Rogan's disinformation that's not COVID related?
I'm not upset. I think Joe Rogan appropriately represents stupid people in America like you, and I think he deserves to be platformed.
Cherry, don't make a bigger hole for yourself by trying to say that I might be stupid, but compared to you, I look like fucking Einstein here. Like, tell me if it's not about COVID. Tell me the disinformation specifically you're talking about, because it seems Rhizome and Heme were talking about COVID, which is who I was responding to.
You brought up the idea
I'm sure there's a lot.
that the disinformation that Rogan spreads on his platform, and the fact that like people don't do their own research, is similar to what the government has done with COVID and their mixed messages, quote unquote, as research gets updated. So you were the first person to bring it to COVID.
No,
all we said, regardless of whether you believe that or not, all we said was that we believe that he has the potential to spread disinformation, And that's what we weren't saying anything specific. We weren't like, oh, this specific information was really bad, and here's why. We were just saying there's a potential for him to be a fun goof and spread disinformation.
Right, and everyone was talking about it in the context of COVID. If you guys want to take it to something else, if you want to say he's wrong on trans issues, by all means, we could talk about it. The point I was making was clearly this. My point is very simple. The people that want to criticize disinformation seem to live in a glass house because they always call disinformation things they don't agree with. For example, I can give you a study right now, a poll right now from the New York Times, right? This poll said, and Bill Maher talked about
Is it a study or a poll?
It's a poll.
So to be clear, I'm sorry to cut you off, but Ben hasn't really said anything since the start of it, and it's been we only have about 30 minutes left on the topic. So I want to throw it over to Ben Burgess.
Yeah, thanks. Rob, I think you should try meditation or weed or something because this level of anger isn't good for you. But I just wanted to make a few quick points. I think that so first, it is not at all true that nobody believed that the Earth was round until Columbus came along. The people had known that for literally 2,100 years before Columbus. Since like 6th century BC. Ancient Greek scholars knew that. Every educated person in Columbus's time period knew that. Columbus himself, was setting out to prove that. That was something that educated people in Europe at the time took for granted. Just Google Columbus, proving North is round debunked, and you'll find tons of stuff about this. I think that it is certainly true that scientists can get things wrong and often do. Science is really hard. You try, you get stuff wrong, and then you go back. You go back to the drawing board and you try again. But all this stuff about who's allowed to talk about it or whatever, since nobody here's advocated deplatforming, that issue more should be listened to. And people talk about doing their own research. If that meant literally you do your own research, like you would actually do scientific research, you would become an epidemiologist, then great. But of course, most of us don't have time to do that. So there's a legitimate, intellectual division of labor. That you become an expert on one thing and you report back to me. I become an expert on something else. I report back to you. And even though the overwhelming consensus of epidemiologists can be wrong, I do still think it's a better bet to listen to, if you're going to trust something, if you're not actually going to do more research than maybe at best you look up a couple papers that you don't really understand all of and skim through them online, then you have to end up trusting someone. And I think that you're better off trusting the overwhelming consensus of subject matter experts. But the last thing, I do really want to emphasize that nobody here has advocated deplatforming or censorship or anything like that, right? I mean, after that was acknowledged, what I heard was that Biden advocates it. Okay, I mean, I think multiple people on this panel tried very hard to stop Joe Biden from winning the Democratic nomination. I'm certainly not a Biden fan. Maybe other people here are Biden fans.
Biden's great.
Okay. All right. But
biggest idiot Democrats ever nominated.
But in any case,
I thought you were moderating CTV.
I think
I'm doing look. Next time you want to figure out what the fuck I'm doing, right? I told you from the start what it was that I'm doing, right? What am I doing? I'm throwing in the memes where they're needed. Ben Burgess has got the mic. Ben Burgess, go back.
All right, appreciate that. So what I was going to say is that I think the biggest whopper that we heard.
Hey, I'm Italian. I take offense to that.
Okay, was that all calls for censorship are coming from the left. Now, even if you equate a corporate centrist who voted for the Iraq War with the left, and even if you do the typical right-wing thing of equating giant profitable corporations with the left and et cetera, none of which really makes sense. That's still not true, right? I mean, right now, The biggest threats to to free speech in the country come from Republican state legislatures that are doing things like passing laws to empower bureaucrats to peer over the shoulders of classroom teachers if they say anything.
Oh my God!
If they
You
say
need to
anything
stop.
that an unsympathetic parent could think came too close to so-called critical race theory, because people are so terrified of people being exposed to those ideas, not to mention laws to legalize running over protesters. So since clearly we're not talking about Joe Rogan, like I think I've heard his name like 4 times in the last hour, we might as well talk about that.
Right, CRT fan here. From a professor, no doubt. Who would have thought someone in academia? I appreciate you worrying about my health by talking about my anger, but I would rather be on, although I might be too boisterous and too excitable, I'd rather be on this side than the fucking snooze fest you are when you're talking. I imagine your class is a hoot, though. Today,
Who cares about snooze fest if he's giving accurate information?
Shut the fuck
Is
up.
it about entertainment?
White Knight Heem strikes again.
entertainment?
You trying to get laid from him like you were a progressive brat? Is that what you're doing
Dude,
here, White Knight Heem? Is that what's up, buddy?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. Ben Burgess might be a catch.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
You're
Well, I'm
bringing
not
up
saying that.
completely irrelevant shit.
married.
Like, what is the
Pete,
fact that
why
he's
didn't
speaking
you
of-
interrupt? Why didn't you interrupt Ben Burgess when he brought up completely irrelevant shit about my anger level? Why didn't you interrupt him, Mr. White Knight?
Why would I interrupt him? He was making a point.
No, he
coming in
wasn't.
here
He was
came in
making a
here
point that
saying
was-
that you're more entertaining than him, and no one would want to take his class. That was your argument.
His
Just to
argument
clarify,
was,
that was what you said.
Just to clarify, I was making a brief point because he took a brief jab at me at stylistically how I talk. Now, you didn't say, hey, Ben Burgess, wait a minute. That has nothing to do with making points on the topic. What does that have to do with anything? Because you're a fucking pathetic White Knight. You don't really have anything to say for yourself, so you're always sticking up. But at least I believe you're just doing it with Ben because you're just a piece of shit, as opposed to when it was Progressive Brat and you were interrupting me in Destiny and sticking up for her because you wanted to get laid. But you're a poor moderator and a poor panelist.
First
so
of
I
all,
don't.
this is really fucked up. This is, hang on one second. I have to speak. I have to speak. This is really fucked up that you would say it. Hang on, Rob. You have a wife, right?
I do have a wife.
I have a fiance for 8 years. I don't fucking appreciate that you're speaking to me like that.
I apologize for your fiance.
No, you should apologize to me for fucking
No,
saying
no,
that shit.
no.
Why the fuck would you say that? I'm
Because
just
you-
saying that it's kind of rude that you're bringing up someone's PhD who's a PhD educated professor and saying that he's boring and that you're more entertaining. Whoop-de-fucking do. Who gives a shit?
Who gives a shit that he thinks that I'm too angry and that he's worried about my health?
True.
Are either of you named Joe Rogan?
Who actually
No,
believes
right.
that he
I'm
cares
Joe
about you?
Rogan.
I'm just saying if someone's going to make a
Listen,
personal
hold
attack
on.
at me, then I'll reciprocate. That's
wait,
okay.
to be fair, I just want to be fair. Rob has made this this topic interesting. Okay, I think we would have all been to sleep by now.
True. Right. Okay, now to get to the
Right,
point.
okay.
Here's where Ben's wrong. Here's where Ben's wrong about this on
But
the
after
topic.
you go, we got to go to Preacher and MPU. They've been
So,
waiting.
first off,
I might have.
First
Like I
off,
was
what we
gonna
can
say.
see, what I was going to say was this study. If we're talking about the dangers of disinformation, this poll, I mean, not study, showed that Democrats, 41% believed that 50% and up of people that get COVID will have to be hospitalized. Another 28% believe that 20 to 49% of people that get COVID will get hospitalized. That's almost 70% of Democrats. The number is under 1%, right? Who spread that disinformation? Where'd that disinformation come from that Democrats believe that? Right? That's what we're talking about. But no one's criticizing that. No one's criticizing the mass amounts of disinformation.
Should I
we
pull
see.
up Republican polls for how much they think the vaccine doesn't work at all?
Isn't that
Or how much
exactly...
or how
real
much all
quick-
these other fucking conspiracies that were happening during COVID, how much they thought masks didn't work and shit? Should I bring
Isn't
that
that
up?
the topic?
Yeah.
Isn't that
Hey,
exactly
can I
why
ask
we're
Mr. Rob?
criticizing Joe Rogan? Because he's spreading disinformation. What I'm saying is, okay, if you could say that, if you could say this is dangerous, because we could look at Republicans
already
and see
agreed
that.
that the-
Why do you
that
have to
people are
constantly
stupid.
interrupt? Why do you
Yeah,
have to
we
constantly
agree.
interrupt?
We
Like,
agree.
I might
We
be an
agree.
asshole, but I let people finish.
Okay.
At least I do
Okay.
that, right?
Because you don't
No, you
stop
don't.
talking. You don't
Okay.
stop talking.
So I'm gonna just force move this conversation over. I'm sure Heem and Rob have probably talked for each 30%, making it 60% of this topic. So I'm gonna move it over to Preacher, who is next. Then we're gonna go to MPU.
Well, hi folks, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing,
So
buddy?
I want to look at. Let's take it back to Joe Rogan and I think their biggest thing with him outside the vaccines was the ivermectin. Now you had all of these figureheads. I'm not even going to call them reporters. Figureheads on all these shows talking about. Oh, he's talking about the horse stuff. The horse stuff. Not a single one of them took the time to find out that it is originally for human beings. So are they not pushing disinformation when they say he's talking about taking a horse dewormer? Because he wasn't talking about taking.
Right. You're right.
Yeah, they were.
I've stopped saying horse dewormer since the very first day I heard it. I'm like, wait a second, humans use this. Why the fuck are we saying horse dewormer?
Leave Rhizome go because he's calling it horse dewormer. Go ahead, Rhizome.
No, I'm saying they were spreading disinformation.
Oh, okay, good deal.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. That's all I wanted to know. Okay, I'll drop it at that.
Well, that's
you
the
guys have
original
fun.
point that Rhizome said is that the public is very susceptible to misinformation from both sides. Whether it's the Democrats who think 50% of people who get COVID are going to end up in the hospital, or Republicans who think that masks don't work or whatever. That's the whole point, is that people don't have the critical thinking abilities to educate themselves on these nuanced things.
Right, and that's what we need to start focusing more on instead of like, oh, well, he's a dangerous douche. How about you're an idiot for not anybody here, but you're an idiot for not using critical thinking to do your own damn research. I mean, my fiance and I argue, and I'll tell you right now because she's not here, I'm correct 100% of the time, but I'm sure she'll say there's disinformation in there. She's lying. She's wrong. I've done my research, but I think that's what we need to do is like maybe instead of calling everybody a dangerous douche because they said this, how about we push more like, all right, if he's wrong, show him he's wrong. Prove he's wrong.
I need to defend myself. The whole night, people have attacked that title. I thought dangerous disinformation douche, the 3Ds. I thought that was a great title. Okay.
Oh, it is.
And I've got
No, that's all. No, Dylan. Specifically, hold on. 3Ds are only good if you have 3 holes. Okay, let's be clear. Okay.
But I believe in 2-hole theory. And for
Triple D's that's pretty big.
That's why 3Ds ain't gonna work. So you just solved your own argument right there.
True. Next is more perfect.
Take the disinformation out. Just use the 2Ds.
Okay. Is it back to me? Is it on me? Okay. We talk about like the people that are you know what? Fuck, I've just lost my whole train of thought, and I never ever fucking do that. Fuck you, CTV.
Fucking NPU lost down there in 3-hole theory. Now you're welcome.
Right, man. I will say that if you're saying that Heemed and Rob have talked for like 30% each, and then immediately after fucking somebody speaks, Heemed jumps right the fuck back in, that tells me he doesn't respect you. He's taking advantage of your weakened state, Dylan. Anyway, the thought will come back to me maybe in this topic, but certainly enough.
I'm sorry, Dylan.
I'll respond to Preacher if that's cool. Just the idea, Preacher, that like everybody would be able to like, number one, the average Joe Rogan listener who's listening to the podcast, number one, to be able to like pick out all of the claims that were made. Number two, to like research them and look into them. Number three, to like be able to like reliably figure out whether or not those are like actually like reliable facts or not. Most people don't have the time for that. Most people are listening to Joe Rogan while they're doing their fucking job or some shit, man. And that's how most people listen to any kind of media. And I would agree with you on the CNN issue where they were like saying that it was horse dewormer, and they weren't putting it forward a very fair framing of that. But the same problem is happening there. I would say the same exact thing. Most people aren't listening to CNN and then looking it up after. Most people listen to that and then they were like, these fucking idiots taking horse dewormer, right? And it's the same thing as Joe Rogan. So if you can see how CNN doing that leads to disinformation being spread, I'm just saying the same thing has the potential for Joe Rogan when his platform reaches 10 million viewers a week. Right.
But my point is, okay, so if he was just talking about, I don't know, the next best book, that's one thing. But when it comes down to talking, like they said when he was talking about the ivermectin, that people started going out and getting this, I forget what it was. It's an over-the-counter version of ivermectin, and it was killing them. Well, if it was the next best book, maybe you don't have to question so much. But if you're about to go get some medication and you're not going to do your research on it, that's got to be on you, not on the guy who said it over here. That's got to be on you. Like,
well, a lot of people have prescription ads in America, right? Like they'll have commercials that are like, ask your doctor about AstraZeneca, see if it's right for you. I mean, they're meant to sell you a medication, not meant for you to find the truth. And when you go to your doctor, maybe it's a psychiatrist who's been sponsored by Adderall to prescribe that to as many people, right? So it's like that we can't really like. The idea that people are going to have the faculty to look into this.
You can't trust a doctor because they might have impure motives. You can't trust a scientist because they might have impure motives. You can't trust Dr. Fauci because he might have impure motives.
You can trust me.
Oh, but we trust you.
Well, my question is this:
what the fuck are your motives?
Do shit.
Serious
yeah,
question.
So then we just don't. So we don't listen to anybody. Everyone can be lying at any time.
Oh, you hear? So look, I get into this argument all the time, right? If you could take the advice of somebody You can either act on it or you can reject it, or you can evaluate it and then you can act on it or reject it. The fact that people say shit doesn't mean shit at all.
Okay, so what you're saying right now doesn't mean shit at all. Thanks.
Stop. If somebody gives you information that you think might be of use to you, and then you turn around and say, well, somebody said that ivermectin is something because it has antiviral properties. And then you go talk to your doctor and your doctor says, you know what, that does work. And then you get COVID and your doctor says, you know what, we had this conversation. That'll be good for you. I'm going to prescribe ivermectin to you. And then you go to your fucking pharmacist and your pharmacist says, I'm not going to fucking fill the prescription. That's a fucking problem because the pharmacist doesn't have fucking expertise that the doctor has. Okay, so are you Sherry? Cherry? Are you going to say that the doctor is less intelligent than the pharmacist?
I think they're both more intelligent than you. I don't know what's going on here. I'm sorry. I got an alert.
That's why I would ask them. No, hey, stop. That's why I would ask them for their fucking opinion, right? And I would take their advice into consideration. But it's still my fucking choice.
But
right?
Of course, and you can choose to die. People make that choice every day.
I have never met you, and I would never denigrate you, and I would never say that you're stupid, but you are acting like a bitch right now.
I'd say it.
I get that a lot.
Fucking true! Right, so this is a great opportunity for me to ask.
CTV. Shut up. Shut up, CTV.
Oh, everybody shut up, please. Okay, my head hurts. And so we're going to have CTV go, then we're going to have him go, and then we're going to wrap this topic up, okay?
Yeah, I just wanted to say this would be a great opportunity to point out that the misspeak in what Cherry said was she pointed out intelligence when she was reporting to the doctor and the pharmacist, when in fact, you're not actually reporting to intelligence there, you're reporting to experience, right? This is what they've dedicated their life to. So there's the truth in that, and whoever's next, go ahead.
No, it's knowledge, not intelligence.
Hello. Intelligence is only your ability to be able to process complex information. The fact that you have more experience with this complex information is specifically the field of study that you are trying to reference.
CTV, God bless you.
Can I ask Terry a question?
Why you even bother trying to argue against me is funny. Right?
That's what I'll do, Rob. I want to wrap up, so you'll have you go before Cherry so she can answer it. So you can do your outro.
That's fair.
Okay, him.
I was just gonna say about the ivermectin thing. I remember I had a family member back in maybe, I don't know, was it May, June, something, when ivermectin was first starting to come into the news, and a member of mine actually said, "Hey, I'm thinking about taking ivermectin. There were studies published that it's helping with COVID." I looked at the study; it was in preprint. Okay. And it looked like a little bit sus. I think the sample size was really low, and it was just like poorly written and stuff. That paper ended up getting retracted because they had plagiarized data, and from there spawned multiple other ivermectin studies and so on and so forth. So I think the whole thing is like, that's why you have to be a little bit like weary when it comes to like all of a sudden, new thing, ivermectin is the cure or whatever, like. And like there's people who can diagnose who can like look through the data and figure out if it's fishy and not, and like I don't know, I think what CTV was saying is right. It's experience, right? Like these people have the experience to be able to correctly digest this information, and like, as much as you guys like to say we should do our own research, the fact is there's a reason why people have to go to university for this shit, and like someone who just has like a high school education or an education in finance doesn't have the foundation to be able to understand these things. That's my take anyways.
Okay, I'm gonna start outros with MPU.
Yeah, so the conversation about
and everybody try to keep it to a minute. I'm sorry, just keep it to a minute so we can have time for the next topic.
The conversation about whether or not Joe Rogan is a dangerous misinformation freak or just a lovable goofball. I think a lot of people were basically talking. The conversation degenerated around to COVID and his take on various things like ivermectin or having Dr. Malone on or whatever. And I think that the baseline is that the left, including the fucking president of the United States, said, guess what? Everybody out there should be trying to fight disinformation. The implication there is that anybody who is not spouting the public line that is offered by the government, offering disinformation, and everybody should be up in arms with your knives, pitchforks, and torches, and you should be trying to do everything you can to quell that. he didn't have to call for somebody to be deplatformed, but that's sort of the modus operandi of the left. If they don't like it, they want to pull it back. Now, I will say that the conservatives do the same fucking thing. Nancy Reagan and all that shit, the war on drugs and all that shit. It's all very common, right? Whoever's in power, somebody's going to resist, and then power wants to quash the resistance. It's true. It's been true since day one, okay? In this particular case, there are things that are being said that if you disagree with it, then your answer is to simply promote that because somebody has more experience or education in a field, that we should just simply take what the fuck they say rather than be responsible or encouraging people to be responsible for the information that they are presented and then try to ask questions and augment their intelligence level with other intelligence level from other intelligent people so that they can make better decisions for themselves. I'm surprised. No, I'm not. Nobody on the fucking left on this panel actually advocated for people trying to learn more. They just said simply accept what the fuck somebody else tells you. And that's bullshit.
Okay, next is going to be Rob Norm.
Okay, I'll say to Cherry real quick. If you say that a pharmacist knows just as much as a doctor, what about nurses? Do they know just as much? Can you answer real quick?
I don't think I said that.
You said, well, they both know
I said
more
that they
than
both know more than MPU.
Okay, well,
yes.
what we see, it's a clever way to get out of the question, but then I guess we'd have to trust those
It
nurses.
depends on what the topic is, like
Right.
of what the subject is. On
whatever.
medication, a
Hey, is
pharmacist
this
will
close?
know more.
Yeah, this is closing. This is closing
Okay.
statement.
Anyways,
Sorry,
I guess
Rob.
she'd
All
be
right,
for
you
the
answer
nurses
later.
being very knowledgeable that chose not to get the vaccine as well. Look, you can see what goes on here. We have to trust the scientists. We have to trust all of them, and it's dangerous for people to platform. Look, Joe Rogan, he's just platforming doctors that you might disagree with, but that doesn't make him dangerous or something like that. We can see with the study that I showed, the argument is he's kind of dangerous or spreading disinformation because then Republicans and right-wing people, which by the way, Joe Rogan's not right-wing, so it's funny that he listens to Joe Rogan to get the right-wing perspective. That's funny. But
I said when he has right wingers on. Why would you?
I
Hey, closing statement team. Closing statement team. Shut the fuck up.
Right. Anyways, so what we can see is that that's the implication is Republicans are getting misinformation. When I point out that when it comes to the severity of COVID, Democrats are wildly more believing misinformation. Like they don't really have anything they say. They say, yeah, what about Republicans? The point is, and what I wanted to ask Rhizome is, he seems to say, yeah, everyone's spreading disinformation. So then what's the safest thing to do? No one talk about COVID? Is that the safest thing? Because when the news talks about it, right, then all of a sudden people hyperventilate and think that it's worse than it actually is and things like that. So whoever talks about it, we're still going to have this, well, you have to rely on the scientists. Now, when I show over and over that the scientists have been wrong, they just say, well, that's okay. That's how science works. They're wrong. They were wrong then, but we have to trust them now. And if you're not a scientist, you can't agree with them. This ignores two things. One, that there are scientists that disagree with them. And second, that scientists as a whole and as a consensus can also be wrong. And when they're wrong repeatedly on a certain thing, and we can see that many of the people that we're told we have to listen to actually have political motivations to push the positions they want, that's ridiculous. Right now, I just want to say when it comes to the censorship question, like we all live in a vacuum. I appreciate Ben Burgess trying to say if we don't teach white kids that they're evil and racist, and if we don't want our tax dollars to go to that, to teaching critical race theory, that's censorship. That's not censorship. We can see most of the censorship's coming from the left. It's coming from the Democratic Party. It's coming from Joe Biden. And the fact that you people on this panel don't want that censorship, that's great, but let's not ignore the fact the party that you represent does.
Rhizome?
Yeah. So basically, my closing statement is pretty simple. Disinformation is apolitical. We seem to all agree that disinformation has the power to spread on a platform that reaches millions of viewers. The comparison of the global scientific consensus to the private conclusions of an agency looking for WMDs in Iraq is laughable. You guys who believe and do your own research in this convo have proven why you're incapable of being trusted to do that. And you guys have shown why Joe Rogan has the potential to legitimize people's completely misinformed way of thinking by playing to their pre-subscribed biases. And Rob, you just asked me what's the safest thing to do. It's trust the larger global consensus than one of the dumbasses who has their research thrown out on its face because it didn't hold any weight and who relies on a podcaster to promote their ideas.
Okay, now I'm going to throw it over to Heem. Muted.
It's best he sounded all night. Still sounded good, Heem.
Oh, I muted you because you were talking during any statement. Sorry.
It's all good. I understand that. Yeah, so I think as we said, none of us said that Joe Rogan should be deplatformed for a lot of this topic. I feel like we were shadow boxing, or the other side was shadow boxing against positions that none of us really held. We just said that he should be criticized, and everyone should be criticized. Just in the same way how I criticized Cuomo when he did the stupid fucking nose thing. The left can be criticized, the right, center. I don't think Joe Rogan is a conservative. I never said that. I said I listened to Joe Rogan to hear the conservative point of view when he has conservative guests on, because he, makes an interesting. He gives them a platform, and I can hear what the rhetoric is from Ben Shapiro. I don't want to listen to a whole Ben Shapiro video by himself. Joe Rogan in general has always kind of been susceptible to these like alternative medicines, naturopathy shits. Even I remember back when Alpha Brain, I don't know if he still shills Alpha Brain, but Alpha Brain was a big thing. A few of my friends were like, get Alpha Brain, get Alpha Brain. I looked into those studies as well, and it was like literally 3 papers that were, I don't even know if they were peer reviewed. They were no meta-analyses, nothing. And I was like, fuck this. So it seems like Joe Rogan always been interested in these like naturopathic solutions. And it doesn't surprise me that like, he's a fun guy. He likes hunting. He likes to hunt for elk and shit. And it doesn't surprise me that like, because he's surrounded himself with the Alex Jones types and so on and so forth, that like those are, his politics has shifted a little bit. Is he a disinformation douche? Sometimes, maybe by accident. For the most part, though, I don't think he's maliciously doing it.
Okay, next is going to be Preacher.
Yeah, I still stick to it that he's a lot of things, but I don't. Maybe he does do disinformation unintentionally, occasionally. But I come down to the research thing because I don't trust my government. And if I'm told that I just have to take what the government says as golden, hell no. We're always supposed to question everything. And unfortunately, in this day and age, the platforms are taken away from anybody who speaks against what the government's allowing. So you have to turn to people like Joe Rogan's going to put this guy on. Now, am I going to buy everything this guy says? 100%? Absolutely not. I'm going to look at what he's saying and research that too and figure out what the hell's going on here, or at least try to. I also like podcasters like Joe Rogan because they'll bring people on who, like he was saying, these guys go to university for so long, get their PhD, and they talk in that language like it's everyday language to them, but not to me. He'll bring people onto his podcast who will speak in layman's terms that I can friggin' understand. So I do appreciate that. Are they always correct? Absolutely not. Does he platform some sketchy people? Yes, he does. But like he said, I do like the fact that he's a hunter, the UFC. I'm not a big fan of his comedy, to be honest with you. I don't think he was a great comedian. I think he's better as a podcaster and a UFC host, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it to CTV.
If I could go last, that would be great, Dylan.
Okay. Cherry?
I'm just going to echo some similar sentiments. Don't deplatform, cancel Joe Rogan. I think it's fine that we have somebody who is like really confident in their ignorance with a platform. I think that represents a lot of the United States. And I think it's ridiculous to just tell people to do their own research in a subject that's so complex and requires a lot of years to study. You don't know what you don't know, and telling people that they should just do their own research afterwards puts them in a position to trust themselves over somebody with a lot more knowledge and experience. And I wouldn't advocate for that.
Next, I'm going to throw it over to Ben Burgess.
Yeah. So after I said that, we shouldn't be firing teachers for what ideas or readings they discuss with their class, the guy at the bottom said that big surprise, and a CRT fan, and notice the equation that saying people shouldn't be fired for discussing an idea, therefore you must agree with the idea. That is a pretty, like, if you can't see the difference between those two things, you don't believe in free speech, full stop. I do believe in free speech, which is why I don't think Joe Rogan should be deplatformed. Neither does anyone else here. And if you think that Joe Biden is, the left, then I think you are most charitably a very, very, very confused person talk to a leftist, they don't like Joe Biden.
Okay. CTV?
Yeah. Okay. So, chat. You know I'm talking to you. People champ here. All right. So, this is what we've been seeing. All right. We saw Rob and Heem coming to it hot and heavy in the beginning, right? Lots of haymakers. They were just knocking the shit out of each other, right? Then we saw the left kind of come in real strong, right, to kind of help. We saw just enough support for Rob to be able to push back, right, what was coming at him. So, what we have not seen yet is any determinate winner. I'm excited to see what happens in round 2, right? Because we've had to hit a couple of people upside the head with the steel chair. You know what I mean? Because, our man Dylan Burns got the COVID, so we got his back. So, from here, going into the second round, we're going to see what happens. Obviously understand, too, if there's a meme opportunity for me to make on the right side of things, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. So, we're going to kick it back over to Dylan. We're going to see how it comes out.
Wonderful. So that was the first topic. We're about to start the second topic. But before that, I want to show everybody something. This is the Hippy Dippy Championship belt we just had made in the customized Dylan Burns workshop by the hands of small Cambodian children. Now, they're in the other room. But, of course...
You're an immigration sponsor now, too?
Yeah, of course. It is different than the last one because it has a black belt, but I'm very excited for this belt. It's extremely high quality, and it will be sent to the current champion, Destiny, soon. And his next challenger will either be CTV or, of course, if CTV chooses somebody to stay in his place, but most likely CTV. Now, since I have COVID, I am not in health to be organizing the big Hippy Dippy Championship. So it looks like the date for the 28th is not going to happen because I'm just too sick to be booking all this shit. And so I want to show everybody just a little sneak peek since it's going to be a tiny bit longer before we see any more matches that we have a new belt made. Okay.
Can I have a request? Can I have one quick request on that? Can you make that after the 14th of February? I'll be out of the country and internet suck for me.
Ain't nobody giving a fuck about that. We're trying to talk about the belt right now, MPU. Jesus Christ. All right.
No, he's moving on to something else.
We're putting on the belt. What the fuck are you talking about? Nobody gives a fuck. You're going to be out of the country. We're talking about the belt, MPU. Come on. The belt. You see how beautiful that thing is?
Stops when I'm out of the country.
Uh-huh. I hear you.
Okay.
I got a scientific paper on it.
You know what? I think you're feeling me full of shit right now because every time you went out to sea on a motherfucking boomer submarine, your ass was out of the country and the world didn't stop then, did it? You just kept on motherfucking turning. You feeling me full of shit right now.
Fair enough, man.
Okay.
Making turns for 3 knots.
Okay. So we're going to start the next topic, and the next topic has to do with racism in comedy. Is racist comedy harmful, or is it harmless, or something in between? We're going to start with Rob.
Sure. A good topic in what we just said, that we know that Ben Burgess would defend a teacher that wants to say black people are inferior from getting fired, right? It'd be against free speech, right? It'd be against free speech. That's what he said. You can't want anyone fired for anything like that, whatever they say, right? Yeah. Real smart. Anyways, by the way, I'd be interested to go back and see if that's all you said.
Fucking liar.
No, let me ask you real quick. If you want to talk during my opening, let me ask you then. So you're saying if a teacher stood up and said, I think black people are inferior, you wouldn't want them fired, or you would?
Obviously, I didn't say anything about
that. No, you
that.
didn't say that, but that's logically...
That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. That has nothing to do with the laws. You're just lying.
No, I'm not lying. That's the logical extension of you saying I'm against free speech if I want anyone fired for teaching something racist.
Stop for a second. Okay. During opening statements, no one else is supposed to talk. If you ask them a question, we're supposed to wait till that. It makes it 10 times more difficult for me to moderate. So let's not break new ground here tonight. Rob?
Fair enough. All right. So, yeah, racist comedy can be harmful, but I basically don't give a shit. I think that vulgar comedy could be harmful to people. Comedy about fat people, comedy about blondes, comedy about men, women, etc. All of it could potentially be harmful. The problem with this is that I think comedy is sacrosanct. I think some of the best comedy is edgy. I think some of the best ways that we come together as people is through humor. For example, postmodernist philosopher Zizek talks about this. He has a big story about, he talks about someone who was an ethnic group that traditionally clashes with his, and they took their relationship to the next level when they just started impromptu making fun of each other's race and things like that. The problem is if it's done by racists, then yeah, absolutely could be harmful and it's not funny then. And that's the crucial thing. Now, it's hard to determine whether or not what someone's intent is, but I don't give a shit if Dave Chappelle wants to make fun of white and black people because it's funny as shit. And most of the time, if people take it in good humor, it brings people together. If you're offended by something, don't watch it, change the channel. But I think that we should have, Patrice O'Neill said this best, that joke that you like came from the same place as that joke that you didn't like, and that we should allow comedy to exist. And I think that you see an attack on comedy today, even Dave Chappelle himself being attacked for things he said, which is ridiculous. So I think that it can be dangerous, but overall, I think the most offensive comedy is that's not funny.
I'd like to go next.
You know what, CTV? Usually I would never abide by somebody, but since you're CTV, I have to abide. So CTV.
I appreciate that, Dylan. So look, let's be clear from the fucking start, because we're not trying to be too loud, right? But we're trying to be loud enough to be able to bring home the fucking message, right? We all heard the fucking rules to begin with. We know what the fuck opening and closing fucking statements are. And all I'm going to do is spend the next fucking minute raging about how it is the two grown fucking, at least high school educated fucking adults, and I would assume higher levels than that considering the level of conversation they fucking engage in, can't understand the fucking rules, right? Opening statements, one person talking, other person, shut the fuck up. So fucking simple. So, if we can just adhere to what very few fucking rules that we got here, I know this second round is about to be a little bit more memey, right? But a lot more spicy, right? So, this is what we're about to see, right? Because I got a feeling that there's going to be an epic battle between Cherry and someone this next round. I don't think we're going to be able to hold her back, folks. She looks like she's about ready to burst over there. She's about to let loose on somebody, right? So, whoo! This is going to be a very, very exciting round. All right, Dylan, go ahead.
Ben Burgess?
All right. Yeah, I think you have to balance the fact that I interrupted him against the fact that I heroically held back while he was doing just about everything short of screaming racial slurs or showing us his dick earlier. So I think that, oh yeah, also Slavoj Žižek is a friend of mine. He's definitely not a moderate. I also don't think he would really agree with you about, I think what he's saying about, racial jokes is a little bit more nuanced than that. But look, I think that I think it depends on intention. I think obviously it's possible to say something cruel and disguise it as a joke, and that you shouldn't do that. That doesn't mean comedy shouldn't be allowed to exist. Doesn't even mean comedy where people are doing that shouldn't be allowed to exist. But like I might dislike it. I think that I think that getting upset at somebody for being offended at a joke is a little bit like getting upset that because someone you have a crush on doesn't like you. It's about there's about as much point to that. I think it depends on delivery, and I think that some of the best humor can mine subjects, including ethnic or racial ones that that we would normally find offensive, and sort of get around those defenses and and make you laugh anyway, right? So I always think of a time I was on David Feldman's show, and we were talking about a shooting at a synagogue, and David said, well, really we have to talk about gun control here because we're always going to have anti-Semitism. And then he does this perfectly timed pause and says, as long as I do this show. And I lost it laughing at it. This is something I'm sure I'm not capturing it, retelling it. But I think that some of this stuff is in the eye of the beholder, and some of it just depends on how well you exit it. So yeah, I think maybe it might seem like a little bit of a cop out, but I think it depends on the joke.
Okay, next we're gonna throw it to Cherry.
I think racist jokes are harmless. I think if you're going to take the position that that it's sometimes harmful, if it doesn't feel like a joke, then that's not a joke. I think if it's a joke, then it's just fucking harmless. Learn to laugh.
Next, I'm going to throw it over to Preacher.
Yeah, I mean, I guess define racist comedy because to me, I grew up in comedy. My father was a stand-up comedian. I did stand-up comedy when I was younger in my 20s. Uh, People using race in their comedy has always been funny. Now, if you're doing it in a way to hurt or degrade, no, that's just racism. That's not comedy. There's a huge difference. But yeah, like Dave Chappelle, he's hilarious. He says, listen, if you listen to Dave Chappelle or Chris Rock or Eddie Murphy do their impression of a white guy and you don't know one person that sounds like that, you're friggin' lying. There's truth in what they're saying. It's funny. We can all joke and laugh and have fun and get together around it. If you go to a comedy show and you get butthurt, well, that's on you. You went to a comedy show. Some woman suing Andrew Dice Clay. Well, lady, who'd you think you're going to see? It wasn't the Pope. But, I mean, take it from where it's at. You're going to see comedy. It's supposed to make you laugh. If you're not laughing, go find a different comedian that makes you laugh. Move on.
Him.
All right. I think I think that racist comedy can be funny. I also think that I don't know, I think all kinds of comedy can be funny. I think it's particularly funny when it is in the expense of the racist, or trans jokes can be funny when they're at the expense of the transphobe. And I used to listen to the Howard Stern show. He used to have on a legitimate KKK member on the show and just rip him to shreds and ask him about his views, but they were so comically bad that he would just laugh at them and stuff. Growing up in a very multicultural city, I grew up around all different cultures, and my very first favorite stand-up comedian was Russell Peters, whose entire act is literally just doing impressions of Indian people, impressions of Chinese people, impressions of Persian people, every impression you can think of, and going down to the the cultural differences between these things. And there are interesting cultural differences. Another very good piece of content that has racial humor is Harold and Kumar, which I think is a fantastic movie that still holds up. And there are nuances with the racism that kind of are a critique of society more than just blanketed racism. Another really good example is with the podcast with Dylan, right? When infamous YouTuber Shuan had asked me if I dipped my chicken nuggets in sand. I mean, that's racist, but it was funny because I know that she's not saying it from a place of hatred. You know what I mean? If I was in an argument, no offense, Rob, but if you said that to me, I would probably be a little bit more hurt. If we were in a heated debate about Dr. Malone and then you said something like that to me, I would probably be like, oh, there's probably some seriousness to this, right? So if it's with friends or if it's in a lighthearted way, and if the person isn't sensitive and you can feel their sensitivity and they can accept it, I think it's okay. Again, self-deprecating stuff is funny. I'd say, I don't know, borderline racial jokes about my own culture and my own upbringing and my parents and how they are and stuff, right? And then lastly, I think if you don't like it, just don't watch it is a pretty good thing. And Rob, I'm gonna say we agree. You said it's not, if it's done by racists, it's not as funny, and I agree with you on that one.
Team.
Next is gonna be More Perfect Union.
Team.
Well, now finally. So I think comedy is like the first and last bastion of free speech, right? The ability to critique, the ability to call out things that people generally find funny, right? Because nobody laughs at a joke that's not funny. So the ability to say things in a way to deflect from an actual attack into something that, hey, we could all laugh at. And for comedians who can do that and they can cross racial bounds, like Chris Rock, right? The Chris Rock test. His whole job since he became a parent, right, was to keep his baby off the pole, keep his kid off the pole, not be a stripper. That makes its way actually into Billions, the TV show, where they had an episode that was actually titled The Chris Rock Test, where Wags goes to a strip club. He's a misogynist, drunk fucking drug dealer. Drug user, Wall Street guy, right? And he goes into a strip club and he looks up and he sees his daughter dancing in a strip club. Okay. So there's funny, right? And it's funny. And the best humor is the humor that we can all sort of say, you know what? I could see that happening, but not believe it applies to any specific individual that I've got. And I think the danger when we talk about like comedy being racist or not is it pejorative, meant to inflict injury to an individual, or is it just a generalization, right? Because I think we can all think that as long as we're talking about somebody who's not us, we can all laugh in a shared way, right? But when we narrow the scope of it and we point it to somebody in a very specific way, then it's not comedy, it becomes invective, right? And I think we can all agree to push back on that kind of stuff. Comedy, I have a problem with it. I've never had a problem with it. I never had a problem with black comics who made fun of white people. I've never had a problem with black comics who made fun of black people. I never had a problem with Wolowitz making fun of Kuthapali on Big Bang Theory. I just think people, Cherry, I think you said it, and I'll give you credit for it. People need to fucking learn how to laugh. And if we laughed more, we'd probably spend a lot less time calling each other stupid.
Okay, now we're gonna wrap up openings with the Rhizome.
Yeah, so first thing for me with this question is I think that there's a distinction between racist and racial humor that we should talk about. And I think most of us who are saying that it's not intrinsically harmful would consider racial humor not intrinsically harmful, but just like Rob said, racist humor would be intrinsically harmful. So the question for me then becomes like, do racial jokes lead to materially harmful outcomes intrinsically? And I don't think that we can say they do. I don't think it's something intrinsic about the nature of a racial joke to contribute to materially harmful outcomes. But I think that it depends on the audience who's listening to it that gives it that power, right? So it's not something intrinsic to the joke, but it's something that the audience can give it the power to play into harmful material outcomes for people. Like what I think about is, would we allow Netflix to host a Nazi stand-up, right? And probably not, because that has a very real possibility of contributing to materially harmful outcomes for certain groups. And it also has the ability to legitimize and motivate an audience who's already feeling these ways towards those groups. So jokes have the power to embolden harmful ideologies. Cherry was saying earlier, if it's not funny, it's not a joke. This is super subjective and different for everyone. And since we can't know how everyone feels about a joke, I think we need to default to more objective measures. Like, does a joke get utilized by a population to further their racist ends? Like minstrel shows, for example. Minstrel shows aren't intrinsically harmful. They're harmful in a world where people are racist as fuck and have the power to embolden their prejudice and use it to oppress others. Last thing is, I think there needs to be a distinction made between offense and harmful outcomes. I don't think offense is the measure of whether a joke is bad or, something that's toxic. I think it's whether it contributes to materially harmful outcomes for people and stops them from being able to live their lives or be validated in society in some way. Edgy jokes are the best, according to Rob, but we need to recognize that they're edgy because they're intended to be borderline. So when somebody reads it that way and internalizes it that way and uses it in a specific way to like go towards a racist end, then that's an issue.
Okay, so now we're gonna have it open for open dialogue until closing statements.
I don't think I said that if it's funny, it's a joke, because jokes hit and miss.
Yeah, see, I called it. I knew Cherry was going to be hot off the top, right? Cherry, take it away.
How is that hot?
I knew it. I knew it.
It was on fire.
That's okay if you didn't say it. I just heard you say, if it's not funny, it's not a joke. But if you don't agree with that, that's fine. I can just wipe that from the record.
Can you take look at those candles next to you.
Nobody laughs at a joke that's not funny, right? And nobody's suggesting, right, that Dave Chappelle would actually walk into a Klan meeting and do Clayton Bixby. Right? I mean,
I think if it's hateful, it's not a fucking joke, and then it's not comedy. Like if the purpose is comedy, I don't understand why we're getting offended.
Yeah, so racist jokes are bad, but I think the more interesting question is about racial jokes, right? And whether they carry an intrinsic harm.
Well, let me ask you
this. Why did you say, yeah, we didn't agree?
Well, if you're saying that racist jokes are not funny.
Racist jokes are funny.
Wait, racist or racial?
Racist or racial, yeah.
Racial, like anything. Make fun of me because I'm Dominican. It's hilarious.
Okay, I wrote down a quote as soon as you said
I'm not making fun of a Dominican woman. That'll be enough.
Okay, so
They will.
the quote that I wrote down that you said was, "If it's not funny, it's not a joke." And so I was just going off of that. But if you want to wipe that from the record, we can. I don't think that's too
Okay.
important.
Well, maybe I worded it like poorly, but I feel like if it's coming from a place of hate, it's not a joke.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go. There you
Okay,
go. She hit
sure,
the nail on the fucking head. I told you Cherry was going to come out strong with this. I called it ahead of time. Who's got the argument against? I'm ready to hear it.
I like how CTV is kind of doing like play-by-play analysis.
I got like a
during the
hype
debate.
man.
I want to ask.
Normally, the players on the field can't hear the hype, but okay.
That's true.
They fucking get in there and quit bitching about it. Let's fucking go. What do you guys got?
Rise him. What's wrong with
Holy shit.
laughing at yourself for something
I like that.
as stupid and as trivial as your race? What's wrong?
Oh shit! Every time I get out of
Did you
the
feel like I
shower,
suggested there was something wrong with that?
Oh, I thought you said that racist jokes are bad.
No, I'm saying that jokes that have the ability to reach an audience and legitimize and motivate them towards certain harmful outcomes, those jokes are bad.
I disagree.
Can I point out where it has fallen? Because I want to point out where it's fallen because.
No, go ahead.
You know, I used to be able to. I'd be in the bar with my buddy, and he would yell out Indian, and I would do an Indian impersonation of something. He'd yell out feminine guy. I'd do that. All these things, and I could do all these accents, all these impersonations. I can't do them anymore because I had to stop, especially being online, because people get so triggered. Say, "Oh my God, you're being racist if you do an Asian accent." Like, I'm doing it to joke around, and I've had Asian people like, "Damn, that's good," but all these white people are yelling at me like, "Oh my, no, you're being racist, Mike." When you say that, I'm lost on that. How am I being racist when I'm just joking around and having fun?
Do you
Like,
think
I can't
that
even do it
some?
anymore.
Okay, let me ask you. Okay, I'm someone whose parents have an accent. I think, and like I find it funny if somebody does a good Persian accent, but I can see many people get very legitimately upset by the fact that like this is not in their control to have an accent, and that you're like trivializing their experience and whatnot. And also, I want to say one more thing. One more thing that. This thing that Rhizome is bringing up, it's not an unheard of phenomenon, right? That was why Dave Chappelle walked back a lot of his previous content that he had made, is because he felt like though they were racial commentary on experiences of black people and white people, that they could be that some people were viewing it in a harmful way, which was like, hey, this is actually how black people are, not that, oh, this is a racist stereotype of black people.
Yeah, specifically.
I also go ahead, Rob.
I was going to say he specifically said he'd be like at Disney World with his kids, and people would come up and like shouting the N word or saying, black people stink, like he did in the what black blind white supremacist skit. What was his name? I forget. It was a hilarious skit.
Oh yeah, Clayton Bigsby.
Now that shit's and that's where Chappelle's joke wasn't racist against black people, right? It was just funny. It was in fact, that joke specifically was racist. That joke was a commentary against the KKK, right? And people took it too far. But I think everyone kind of agrees here. So I want to try to find a little bit of disagreement. Like, Rhizome, I think you're making an interesting point. Like, my point is we just default to it's okay to tell these jokes, and then it's a shitty standard, but it's the best we have to say, like, you just have to have a gut feeling if the intent was meant to be harmful or not. Like, if I walk into a bar and I hear two white guys and one of them tells a black joke, but I know for a fact that, like, that guy's married to a black woman and he tells this joke to her and she tells anti-white jokes, I'm probably not, like, whatever. But if I know that these two assholes are racist and they're telling black jokes, I'm like, go fuck yourself. And I know that's not a good standard, but the alternative standard that seems to be applied, which is if people could use that joke in a shitty way, then we objectively say that it maybe is not the best thing to make that joke. I disagree. I think that comes down to the idea of guilty based on association. And I think that, we condemn the actual racist. You don't condemn the person that's making a joke because someone took that joke and did something poor with it.
Yeah, but Rob, look, all I got to say is that if I walk into a bar and I see a black guy, a Jew, and an Italian sitting at the bar, I'm walking the fuck back out. I know there's something about to go down,
Yeah.
right?
Some horse is going to come in or something, right? Yeah.
Something's about to happen. I don't know what the fuck it is, right? But I ain't about to be a part of it. You know what I mean?
So if I could just make an example of like Steven Crowder doing his blackface with like the American Gothic portrait up, right? And he like had this black scent on the whole time. I'm not imagining his audience sitting there like, oh, this is a pretty like humorous depiction of black people, but it's not too serious. I look at them thinking, this is exactly how black people are. This is exactly how they think. This is exactly
Isn't
what they do.
Steven Crowder like racist?
Right. So his
Yes.
jokes.
So his joke would be
Do you
rooted in
think
hate.
Steven
Like,
Crowder's racist?
But we can't know that
You-
his jokes, not every joke is rooted in hate just because he's racist. He can say things that aren't racist.
But do you think Steven Crowder is racist?
No, I'm not even trying to go there. Cherry kind of went there. All I'm trying to say is that when he did that skit with the Black American Gothic portrait and he had the black scent, I know his audience is listening to that thinking this is exactly how black people are and walking away from that with more racist sentiment than they walked in with.
But by the same token, could we say that, a comedian...
Did you just say token?
Maybe
I
not.
think he was talking about the subway.
Maybe not like a super mainstream popular black comedian like Chris Rock or Dave Chappelle, because I think we can agree their audience transcends race. They're super popular, but like if you went to like sort of a nightclub in an inner city, like in inner city Chicago, where predominantly black people were and there were predominantly black comedians. And I've seen Louis C.K. talked about some of this. He wrote the movie Pootie Tang, so they mistakenly thought he was black and invited him to these comedies, and people were like, "Who the hell is this ginger?" But anyways, if you heard them telling jokes like, "Oh, look at these white people, like they're so bland and blah blah blah. They're only interested in money laundering." That audience probably thinks, "Yeah, that's how white people are." Yeah, I think that black comedian has every right to tell that joke, and that doesn't prove that he's racist.
Right, but when the nature of your joke contributes to people voting against a population of people's best, they're voting against black people's interests, the people who listen to Steven Crowder, right? They're anti-BLM, they're anti-
And that's in black people's interests. If they're anti-BLM, they're pro-black people.
Bringing it into politics.
Wait, sorry. Can I say, Rob? I like what you were saying, right? I would say that like it's just like if that kind of joke might actually sway some people's actual opinions about white people, and that's where it's like it's like a joke should be like, we could all take away that like fucking, you shouldn't walk away thinking, oh, actually all white people are doing money laundering. I think that's where the kind of I don't know, the potential danger of it comes in.
That's on you as the
Can
audience.
I engage with what Preacher said earlier? Can I engage with what Preacher said earlier? He mentioned like using an Asian accent or something like that, understanding that like it's a joke, but other people hearing it might perceive it as like being racist or whatever, right? Is that what you said, Preacher?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be like reading the room or something like that, because it's very possible that you have somebody making a joke and it doesn't come off like a joke. And like for that, I think if you're not around good company, you're probably doing a bad thing. Like, do you understand how that also like contextualizes this?
Yeah. And one of the things I really noticed when I used to do a show in the morning on the Republican Nation, there was a young guy that would come in. He lives in Mexico, born and raised in Mexico, and but he's white complected, blue eyes. And in his Instagram picture, it's him. He has a mustache, a poncho, and a sombrero. And a white woman from the United States messaged him saying, "You need to change your picture. That's cultural appropriation." I think a lot of times people jump on stuff not realizing, like, okay, with that's obviously not cultural appropriation, but a lot of people want to defend something that doesn't even need to be defended sometimes. I would, and I hope people understand, I've never tried to be, usually when I did my comedy was beating the piss out of myself. I loved it like that. I mean, if I can't laugh at myself, I shouldn't be laughing at other people.
TPU, I'll jump in if you didn't want to, TPU. I thought you wanted to say something.
Go ahead, Rob. I'll come in.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, yeah, the problem is, right, like, what you just said there, Rizom, is like now you're branching out. Now it has to do with voting. Well, I would contend the people that voted against BLM's interests were actually voting for black people. The whole defund the police shit has been more harmful, as I said it would be, to the black community through the defunding of police. The president of Joe Biden's been worse off for black people on average than the presidency of Donald Trump.
I'm trying to talk about comedy, Rob.
Right. So then why did you bring up voting?
Because I was trying to tell you how I see that contributing to harmful outcomes.
Well, I
wasn't
think
trying to debate whether or not right people or left people are correct on
Well,
BLM.
right, but I guess I'll put it this way to make it more broadly. The reason that I sort of
save that for
disagree
the
with
next
your
topic.
point is because it implies what your thoughts on understanding people's thought process are. So you say, I think that Steven Crowder's audience would think that this is how all black people are, and therefore they would go vote in a certain way. And I think that that's you're claiming to know too much about what these people's inner thought working processes are.
Right.
You
I
can't-
forget all about how left-wing Steven Crowder's audience is.
What does that have to do with if they're
that's
racist
got
or
nothing
not?
to do
Or if
with
that
it.
joke
Okay,
has to
if
do
you don't
with
know
it.
how
I think
voting
that's-
for
I
the
think
right
that's
in this
more-
country contributes to racist outcomes, I'm,
Defund the
Yeah,
police. I don't want to talk about politics.
whoa,
Voting for the
That's
right.
bullshit.
Like,
Wait,
I don't want to talk about politics.
Wait a second.
You don't get to get away with that.
Hold on. Everybody else shut the fuck up. Right? The man's obviously coughing. Pay attention to your fucking camera, right, to see what's going on. That way we don't have to be having me fucking come in here and act like a complete fucking asshole, because I don't fucking mind doing that.
You need rescue breathing, Dylan?
Yeah, I need rescue breathing. I need Ben Burgess to come over here. Give me the Heimlich, okay?
Get some ivermectin.
But yeah, I need some
I'll
I need some
throw-
I need some I need
throw
some
Rogan over
somebody
with his big
I
bag.
need some horse meds, man. But okay. So we're gonna go one at
Well,
a
for
time.
you just need a pony meds.
Thank you.
You're not that big.
We're gonna go one at a time. We're gonna start because I think there was 3 people who ejected the rhizome just said. I want to make sure we don't have a pylon. So we're gonna go Preacher, Rob, then MPU in that order.
My computer's tripping.
I'm always last.
Stop putting acid in it. Yeah, no, I'm just gonna say, like, to sit there and say that because Steven Crowder did that thing that's gonna make his audience think, well, black people. Let me tell you something. I'm part of Steven Crowder's audience, and I grew up in a melting pot of a high school. I don't need Steven Crowder to explain black people to me. I've grown up with blacks. I've lived among them, and even I'm not going to try and explain that culture. It's not my culture. But I can tell you right now,
emboldened to do it.
he may feel emboldened to do it, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be like, well, damn, Steven's right. Damn everything I knew in my past. Steven's right. I'm going to go vote against these guys. No, he's not changing my mind because he makes a stupid-ass joke. I've said for the longest time Steven Crowder's comedy has fallen off, and he's doing nothing but trying to go to the
Falling
edge.
off.
But to sit there and assume that because he does some poor skit, it's going to take his voters and change their mind? No,
I
absolutely
assume
not.
he's playing to the sensibilities of the people who are watching him. The political
That's your
sensibilities
first
of the people who
problem,
are
right?
watching
You're
him
assuming.
are that black
You're
people
assuming.
are dirty, stupid,
Oh, God, no.
uneducated. Okay.
Listen,
I mean,
some
what
of
else
the
does that
stupidest people
what
I
else
know
does that
are
routine
black,
communicate
and some of the
besides
dumbest
that?
people I know are white. Listen, it
What
communicates.
does that routine communicate besides that? Yeah.
The routine communicates that he's a bumbling idiot at times.
Okay,
What
but
is-
what's the
what-
point of the
what-
joke? He's not just
what
making
is
the joke to sound
what-
like a bumbling
What
idiot.
does-
Maybe not, but that's
What
how it comes
does-
off to most common people.
Okay, but you're
What
running
does,
away from
like-
the point. You agree with me that it has a racist conclusion to it. You're just not saying it. You just want to say that most people can think
No.
around it.
Okay, so first of all, that's not what my argument was with you. For one thing, I haven't seen the skit you're talking about. For another thing, my thing was I'm in
Wait,
that
then why are you
audience
talking about it if you haven't seen the skit?
because I'm talking about being a part of Steven Crowder's audience that you just said about. So I've
Okay,
watched
maybe
him
you should
do
watch
other
the skit,
skits.
then come back.
Well, I've watched his other skits, and I've never
Jesus
once
Christ.
said, well, jeepers, Steven Crowder said this. I might as well change my 48 years
Maybe
of thinking
this
to
skit
what
is
Steven
more
Crowder said.
unique than those ones is.
I highly
Maybe
doubt it.
maybe you should
I
look
highly-
into it.
Maybe
can I-
your assumption about Steven Crowder's audience is wrong.
It could be, but I have more information on this than you, it seems.
I don't know how you could possibly have more information considering you would only have the same amount of information that the rest of us have. So what sort of insight do you have to that audience that the rest of us don't have, Rhizome?
Oh, I'm saying Preacher hasn't seen the skit, so at least I know what I'm referencing.
If I may, that's irrelevant to what Preacher's talking about right now. You made
Oh,
a
is it
broad-
when he's making claims about how people read that skit?
No, he's not making those
No,
claims.
you're
He's
making
making
claims about
claims.
how people
Please, if you
read
let me,
it.
you're making claims of what his audience is and how that would interpret how they looked at that skit. He's saying, I'm a member of that audience. No, you're not a member of that audience, but you're speaking, saying that people in that audience think black people are dumb and dirty. You don't have any fucking proof of that. None whatsoever. And you saying, well, I've seen the skit, but you're using circular logic. You're saying, well, the skit is bad because his audience are racist, and I know that because the skit was racist, which proves the audience is racist.
Oh, I'm not saying the audience is racist proven by the skit, by the way. So, sure, that would be circular if that's what I was saying.
Okay, then what does him not having seen the skit have anything to do with what you're talking about?
Well, he can't talk to what the skit was intended
But
to
he
do,
could
even
talk
if
to
he's a
the
member of
audience. He could talk to what the audience of Steven Crowder is. The
If he
skit's
never saw that
irrelevant.
skit, he doesn't know what its intention was.
You
Simple as that,
literally
Rob.
like
Hey,
what
hang
I love
on,
about what I
Rob.
love about people what I love about this is like it's not just that you're like because what we can see with your logic, it sounded reasonable in your opening statement, but now what you see is I don't want to talk about voting and then or politics. Then you immediately talk about politics, and you can see what's happening here is this is what like sort of people like this do that want to be offended by everything. They're like, well, they sound reasonable at first, and then
Does
go,
it sound
"But
like I want to be offended by everything? The first thing I said is offense is not important, and that we should talk more about the harmful outcomes.
Well, I'm glad
I in fact threw out the notion of offense, so you might want to
that's
walk
the
back.
offense.
Well, the people the people that want to denigrate certain comedy
Rogan,
or
maybe?
certain people producing certain comedy as speaking to racists because they claim that they have they have workings of inner thoughts of who that audience is. People like you, but
Is
not
that
only
a
are
full
you
sentence, man?
Yeah,
Can you
if
reword
anything,
that?
it was
I
a
actually
run-on.
didn't comprehend that. Maybe you're too five-head.
Well,
for me.
apparently, maybe you're one of those people, you know, that just thinks that they're smarter than they actually are. Because I'm not surprised you can't comprehend it because you've showed you don't even understand how logic works or basic argumentation works, right? Because you literally don't understand that you're saying to him he can't speak as to the audience of Steven Crowder because he hasn't seen this skit. But then you know the context of the skit proves that his audience would somehow be racist. You don't even understand the circular logic of that. And the point is, it's just bullshit people like you that want to blame other people and want to try to have control that says, well, I know this is racist because of that audience. But if I talked about an audience, that, for example, of a black comedian that wanted to denigrate white people, you would say it would be ridiculous if I said, I know that every member of that black audience hates white people and they want to see
Rob,
them suffer.
I'm right here. You could have a conversation with me instead of just straw manning if you wanted.
Okay, so do you know what every member of, say, like Charlie Murphy's audience wanted?
Nope.
Oh, but you do know Steven Crowder's.
Nope.
You just said that you know that his audience are people that think black people smell and are stupid.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that that's his whole audience, but that's who he speaks to.
Okay,
yeah, and that's who was resonating with that sketch. Yeah.
Do you think Charlie Murphy's audience, do you think there are members in it that think
that
white people are terrible?
Probably, but that's not the point of his comedy.
But he certainly has jokes that denigrate white people.
Right, but he's not a political comedian.
So
Steven Crowder is specifically advocating for racist outcomes.
no, he's not advocating for racists out there. It's just bullshit race grifters like you. We'll get to it more in the BLM topic, but Dan, you're sounding real good.
Rob, can I ask?
You might be surprised on my take on BLM.
Hey!
Okay, CDB. Okay. I'll be fine. I'll just mute people going forward if I need to be quiet. You don't need any more yelling, okay? It's not gonna be the COVID that takes me. Okay, here's a question. If you guys yelling on this panel kills me, was that a COVID death or not a COVID death?
I bet the Democrats will mark it down as a COVID death, Dylan.
No,
Fucking
will.
they won't because
it's
Biden's in
information.
office.
Okay, so
Definitely non-COVID.
so
Rob,
what? 1 second. More Perfect Union was next, and then I'm gonna throw it over to Heem. But I'm gonna ask people to keep their voices down and please listen for me or turn me up if possible. I can't really yell tonight.
Okay. I'll do it like Joe Biden. It's like this. The take.
Stop.
Okay, sorry.
That's ASMR.
I'm not capable of speaking that quietly. Okay, so check it out. You cannot say that we're talking about comedy and whether comedy happens to be racist or not, and then you immediately jump into a fucking conversation that says that comics who espouse certain comedy and have an audience, then that audience is then predisposed to outcomes that are fucking non-efficacious towards people of color. That's exactly what the fuck you did.
I think you guys don't understand the word outcome.
No, outcome. Votes for the wrong kind of people. People that don't like people of color. Right?
The
no,
vote's not the outcome, my friend.
I figured it out. Okay?
Let's hear it.
Anybody who doesn't denigrate white people or denigrate people on the conservative side of the spectrum is somehow bad, and it's going to create a bad outcome for fucking people of color. You missed the entire fucking point about this conversation. Okay, the conversation is, oh, I'll fucking school you, buddy.
Let's go.
Okay,
man.
if you shut the fuck up, I'll be happy to do it.
Well, go ahead. You keep telling me to shut the fuck up instead of talking.
Stop.
Actually, the
interrupting.
only one. Hold on. I got to point this. MP, if you don't mind for a moment, just a moment, right? I feel like the only person that needs to be schooled up here is Dylan Burns, right? From the last time that I was on the panel with COVID, the only thing that seemed to help to get me through that was a little bit of alcohol. So, you know.
He's underage, bro.
He's 20.
No, I thought he was 21.
No.
Oh, well, that's
You're a bad
Anyways,
influence.
let me awkwardly
That
transition
sucks.
into my question. So,
Wait, more perfect
Like
Union.
I
were you
was done.
finished?
But go ahead.
oh, I thought he was done.
Well, I just said more perfect Union. Are you finished or no?
No, the bottom line is comedy that is funny should be embraced. Things that challenge our notion of what is acceptable in society should be, if they can be done in a humorous way. And if it makes fun of fucking people who happen to be of a certain color or religion or whatever, as long as they're just if they're bringing forward the idiocy of the moment, that's fine. When they start attacking people, and to your point, you cannot show Rhizome, you cannot fucking show. I dare you to show me some kind of result that says that Steven Crowder's people actually go out and they wear Klan fucking hoods and they voted for white supremacist fucking presidencies. Go ahead, I dare you to fucking do it. But
That's the level that we need to get to before it's a harmful outcome. God damn.
It's a fucking hard. No. My point is, you cannot establish that anybody who fucking listens to Steven Crowder is out there fucking harming minority communities. You can't fucking do it.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying, that they're actively
That
killing
is
black people or
what
some
you're saying.
shit.
No, that is exactly what you're saying. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. You try to run this fucking nuanced line about saying, well, this is where the outcome could be.
Yeah, I run a
it's
nuanced
really
line
wrong
and then
if
you
do
reduce it into
Bullshit.
this
No,
dumbass shit because you don't know what outcomes means and you think it has to be KKK robe wearing people lynching black people for it to be a harmful outcome.
Okay. Your ability to understand an outcome is like anything that doesn't go the way you want it is the outcome. Fuck you, man. That's not a fucking. You are not making a good argument. You're just making a specious bullshit argument.
Okay, if that's what you think my argument is, that's what you think my argument
You
is.
don't know what your argument is. Your argument, your argument
changes
changes because you know that you're getting schooled.
Okay, well, let's move it over to him then.
Okay.
Heem, did you have something to say?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay? Okay. So Rob, you were bringing up Charlie Murphy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think like it's interesting to bring that up, but I think there's a little bit of a difference between a Steven Crowder, who's like a political commenter, and a Charlie Murphy, who is like a specific stand-up comedian. And I think an interesting way that we could measure it is through Steven Crowder's YouTube section, his comment section, right? If I were to go on Steven Crowder, let's say when he kneeled on George Floyd, when he had the police officer kneel on his back to demonstrate that George Floyd, and if I went under that comment section, do you think that the comments would have like little racism, or do you think they'd be filled with racism?
I don't care. If you go into almost any YouTube comedian's channel, you're going to see all kinds of vulgar shit in the comments section.
Nope.
And
You won't.
Yep.
No, come on.
Yep.
No.
Let me ask you this. So, for example, if we're going to make this political and things like this, we just had a poll come out that said that, for example, over 50% of Democrats thought that if you're unvaccinated, that you should be put in a temporary government facility. So if a comedian like Stephen Colbert makes fun of people that don't believe in the vaccine, and I went to the comment sections, would I see people that were engaging in bigoted arguments in those comment sections against the vaccinated? Unvaccinated?
Probably.
I mean? Okay, so
Yeah,
then
probably.
he shouldn't tell that joke. That's a bigoted joke, correct?
We're not talking about racism. Anybody can choose to get vaccinated, but you can't change your skin color.
Well, nonetheless, the same argument applies.
Well, that's a
that
huge
it's
difference.
No, it's
That's a huge
still
difference.
it's still the theme of it's still the same in that it shows bigotry, and we could do the same. Like for example, we could take comedians that have been like had a lot of anti-white jokes that are very vulgar, like maybe a Cat Williams, and I'm sure that if there was a
I don't like Cat Williams.
I don't
like
care
Cat
if you do
Williams.
or
I
not,
think,
but
I think
I
no, what
do.
I'm saying is I think Cat Williams has had, if you were to like, I would hold the same standard for Cat Williams. If Cat Williams had a YouTube channel and I went under his comment section, it would probably be filled with a lot of racism of people who are unironically being racist.
I don't give a shit. That doesn't mean that Cat Williams should be judged if people that watch his
But no,
videos
you
on
were
YouTube
asking
say shitty
Rhizome.
stuff.
Wait, sorry. You were asking Rhizome how would he measure whether or not Steven Crowder's audience is believing the racist things he says, and you were comparing it to Charlie Murphy. I'm just saying one is a political commentator and the other is a specific stand-up comedian. And if you look at their YouTube comment section, you would get a pretty good cross section. If I go and look at a comment section of John Oliver, who's also a comedian, I guarantee you the comment section would be completely different there. or even a Louis C.K. or something like that. The comment section would not be filled with racism as they would be with Steven Crowder.
It depends on
That's
what you
all I'm
call
saying.
racism. I'm sure if there were people, if they made jokes at the expense of white people, I'm sure there would be people in that comment section of John Oliver, who's a political comedian, that would be making jokes that were to the degradation of white people, if that's what the specific joke was about. And the point is that this is all irrelevant anyways.
John Oliver doesn't do that, though. That's the thing. That's the whole point.
All of this is irrelevant anyways because all of this is irrelevant anyways because the idea of guilt by association is ridiculous. It doesn't matter. If we would somehow find out, for example, that a comedian from the past, like Lenny Bruce, that I really respect, if we were somehow to find out that the reason that he was being arrested for what was the laws? I forget the type of law he was being arrested for. But basically, the joke he was telling that got him arrested over and over again was he was making fun of Catholics, right? He was saying, basically things, sexual things about the Virgin Mary and things like that. And so he kept getting arrested for obscenity. If we found out now that a bunch of Muslims that dislike Catholics and are bigoted towards Catholics are like, yeah, Lenny Bruce is awesome. Yeah, that's great because down with Catholics, I wouldn't say, oh, that must mean that Lenny Bruce, this must have been a dangerous joke. Like, that's nonsense. We don't judge people by guilty by association like that.
Sure, but I'm just saying that you were pressing Rhizome and saying, "Oh, there's no way you could measure it. Do you know every single thing?" I'm just saying you can get a kind of.
Hey, Rhizome, is that how you measured it? When you made that statement, that's what you were doing, right? You made that statement because you saw YouTube comments, right? That's what you did.
Kind of. It's the reaction of the audience. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't believe that. I don't believe. And if I could say real quick, and I can say this real quick, right? Like the point is when Rhizome's now trying to get out of this by saying outcomes, the outcomes are relevant, right? So for example, if I choose to vote for the Democrats because I think the Democrats will help inner city Chicago, so I vote for Democrat and they make it worse, you then get to imply, see, he voted for the group that made it worse for black people. That was the outcome. But that's what you're trying to default to when we're pinning you down to what you said. Steven Crowder's audience thinks that black people smell bad and they're stupid and things like that. And we're like, that's a bigoted thing to say. You don't have any proof that that's the case, that that's a considerable amount of his audience. And you don't have proof that they're out there wearing Klan robes and doing stuff like that. And you say, no, it's
that's not the border of racism, the line of racism
and
is
I'm
wearing
explaining
Klan robes, dude.
I'm explaining it to you. You're saying, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about outcomes.
It's whatever you say.
Please, let me finish. I'm talking about outcomes because they voted Republican and that was worse. Well, that doesn't prove shit any more than you vote. Do you vote Democrat? How's that working?
What I think
in
is really funny about this line of questioning is that from my opening statement, Rob and MPU have just strawmanned me into this like woke, scoldy, lefty type that they think that I am with no bearing on my actual arguments. I'm not even going to respond to what you're saying, dog.
Right. I know it's us strawmanning you when you literally said Crowder's audience thinks black people stink and are stupid. That's us strawmanning.
Yeah, I think, and I will say that again. I think a decent portion of them believe that. Absolutely.
Right. And where do I get that?
Based on audience reactions.
Stop. Okay. We're just gonna wrap this topic up. We're gonna go on to the next topic. I'm gonna start outros with MPU.
John Oliver's not a comedian.
Your name's not MPU.
Yeah, MPU? But okay. Let me lead with that. John Oliver's not a comedian, but no. Look, the funny shit is funny shit, right? And it doesn't matter if it crosses race, gender, sexual identity, political boundaries, whatever, right? It doesn't matter if it is not specifically targeted at specific individuals or done with an evil intent. Now, difficult to sort of interpret sometimes what evil intent is, but also understand that the comic is trying to be funny. Nobody that is in comedy for money is trying to be offensive. They're trying to be edgy. They're trying to find a new way of sort of flipping it over, like to dovetail into the last conversation. It's like the scientific method. You figure out what's funny, and then other people talk about it, and then you sit back and work out. There's guys that they sit back in the green room and they fucking bullshit and they meme with each other and they try to come up with ways to make things funny. Preacher, I know you know what this is like. CTV, you know what this is like, right? And people are just on a boat, right? We're just sitting around. We're constantly fucking around with each other and trying to figure out how to one-up each other. And that's the nature of what makes comedy funny, is that somebody finds a way to say a thing in a new way that will make somebody laugh, right? People that are out trying to do the opposite thing, like they're trying to say something to hurt people, to denigrate them, to harm them, that's not comedy. And Cherry, you said it right in the beginning, right? There's no sense in not trying to fucking find a way to laugh more about the situation that we find ourselves in the world. Steven Crowder, I don't think Steven Crowder's a racist. I think he is a fucking far right person. Okay, and he does stuff. And for people on the left, which I'm going to make a presumption because I don't know you, Rhizome, okay, that people on the left who want to say that certain comics are bad for society because they could potentially produce a bad outcome that hurts certain groups who might be the target of certain jokes, is going to be is somehow problematic. I think that that's just fucking stupid, and I'm really sad that this topic took a fucking hard left turn into the political sphere when really we were just debating whether or not there was appropriateness for certain kinds of comedy.
Okay.
I think it's bullshit.
Next is Rob.
Yeah, I mean, my opening statement basically said what I thought. The only thing that I'll add here is, it's just funny. I don't want to talk about politics. Why are we talking about politics? Oh, but his audience votes for outcomes. I mean, it's just stupid. Like, the idea is this is what you'll often see for people that want to say that, their side, everything they like. You see a theme through two speeches. Things I don't like is disinformation. Well, what about when the scientists were wrong? Well, that was different. We still trust the scientists. You can't question them. Things that I don't like is offensive comedy, and things like that, because I know the intent of their audience. Oh, but the other people that might say offensive things to other groups, I don't know the intent of their audience. It's just bullshit. We don't judge people as guilty by association. So I stand by my original comments any more than if Dylan tells a joke, it makes a self-deprecating joke or something like that, and then the majority of the people in his audience end up being shitheads and taking some bigoted outcome. I don't blame Dylan for that, just like I wouldn't anyone else on this panel. And so I just think that it's just an excuse to go after someone that you dislike politically. That's why Rhizome couldn't wait to bring politics into it. And shame on you for trying to denigrate like an entire audience of people, or a substantial amount of that audience, for being flaming racists that think black people smell bad and are stupid and things like that. It's pathetic. It's disgusting. But of course not beneath you, as would be expected from what I've seen in your first two topics here. So
Rhizome.
Yep. So first of all, we can't interpret people's intent. That should be pretty obvious. All we can do is look at the outcomes that the jokes lead to. When racist sentiments are the outcomes of the jokes, they can contribute to harmful outcomes. Pretty obvious. I think it's telling that instead of addressing my points, Rob and MPU just say, this is what we would expect to see from people like this. They don't have any critical faculties. They just use labels and bias and apply those to people. Rob says it's just an excuse to go after somebody politically and condemns me for bringing it to that, when I've been trying to avoid that the whole time, and they've been the ones who bring it to that. So,
Preacher.
Yeah, comedy is comedy. It's funny. It's meant to be funny. It's meant to make you laugh and have a good time. We can joke about each other. We can joke about ourselves. There's a huge difference between race comedy and racist. There's no racist comedy. If it's racist, it's racist. It's not funny. Plain and simple. But if we're just joking around and like telling racist jokes between each other, that's not cool. But a comedian that gets up and a black guy talking about black stuff funny, white stuff funny, white guy doing it funny, it's where it's coming from. If it's not meant to come from actually, Dave Chappelle said, I'm not saying this to be mean. I'm saying it because it's funny. It's plain and simple. A comedian's not trying to be mean. If a comedian's trying to be mean, then they're not going to be a comedian for long. They're not going to be able to do that as a profession. So I don't know. I think we get too butthurt and we way overthink stuff and we take it way too far than what it's meant to be. Just laugh. We got to learn how to laugh a little bit.
Him.
So first of all, John Oliver is definitely a comedian. Just because you don't like his comedy, I literally just pulled up a clip of him doing a stand-up special. He was also a comedy actor. He was an actor in Community before he was got his own show on HBO. I mean, he's as much of a comedian as it gets. And then otherwise, I want to say, like, yeah, again, I think that like it just depends like whether or not the audience perceives it as malicious. You know what I mean? I think non-malicious racial humor can be funny, can be introspective about cultures and backgrounds and so many different nuances between people that like that's what makes them interesting sometimes. But I think there is something to be said that like and I know this is closing statement, so we won't get to do a back and forth, but let's say that Steven Crowder's audience did come away thinking that all black people smell bad. Would you then condemn that level of humor, or would you still say, nah, fuck it, it's not his responsibility or whatever? So I guess we won't really get to finish that. But yeah, in closing, I want to say, I think, and one other thing, like the way I conduct myself in public is different than the way I conduct myself in private. I know that's a hot take in some places, but like I would make jokes with my friends because I know they're not racists that I would never make on a stream because I don't know who's watching my stream. I don't know how they might perceive my joke or whether they might think that I'm malicious. So I think all of these nuances have to come into play. And I don't think it's so black and white. I think there's a lot of gray area. And again, if you don't like it, you can just, there's a lot of shit I don't like. I just don't watch it. So that's my take.
Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the what MPU said, that funny shit is funny shit as long as it doesn't come from a place of cruelty. I actually do disagree, I think, with Rhizome. I think that I think we can judge intent. I think we do it all the time. Oftentimes it's actually easier to judge intent than it is to judge outcomes, especially given how tenuous the connection is between something like comedy and political outcomes. And yeah, I don't know. My only comment on Steven Crowder is that I really wish his dad would let him debate Sam Cedar.
Jerry?
I think racist jokes are funny, and I like laughing at them.
CTV?
All right, so it's obvious, Chad, what we've been seeing so far. I told you Cherry was going to come out strong to begin with. What I didn't realize is that the ever-loving fuck of shit that was going to drop out of the bottom half of the panel, right? Like it totally did. So we all watched it. It was funny, right? It was funny, right? So, but moving on from here, right? I think it's obvious that we can all see the future, right? The future is, in fact, idiocracy based off of all of the arguments that you've ever saw here tonight or any other past Hippy Dippy that you've watched in the past. So the clear answer here, right, is CTV 2024 and 2028. And I'm even willing, right now to commit to a vice presidency candidacy for running with Mr. Dylan Burns in 2038 and 2042. And yes, you smart motherfuckers, I did the math to figure out what fucking years that would be. So 38 and 42 VP CTV, let's fucking go.
Happy to hear it. Okay, now we're going to go on to the last topic of the night, and that has to do with the fact that Martin Luther King Day just passed, and is a two-part question. If you just wanted to concentrate on one part of the question or the other part of the question, that's fine. The first part of the question is, what is the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., and would he have supported the modern day movement of Black Lives Matter? And so I'm going to start in the top left-hand corner with Ben Burgess.
Yeah, I mean, the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., besides having obviously played a huge role in getting rid of apartheid in the United States, which is what we had in several states up until the mid 1960s, is that unfortunately a lot of what he stood for has been really sanitized in the way that he is popularly remembered. So by the time he was assassinated, lots of the mainstream press had turned against him because of his strong stance against the Vietnam War, because he was widely blamed for rioting that happened in different cities. They said, "Oh, he says he's against it, but it's really his fault." There are lots of Chicago Tribune editorials like that from back then, and he was. I think the most important thing about Martin Luther King is that he was a socialist. That he thought that once you have eliminated those apartheid laws, that the next question is, what are you going to do about the long-term economic effects of those laws, which obviously we're still living with today? And he thought that you needed a massive program of wealth redistribution through universalist programs like a federal jobs guarantee, which was something he was very excited about. Would recommend people Google Freedom Budget. And would he have supported BLM? Yeah, I mean, I think he would have certainly, if that means like that specific nonprofit, that has the name BLM. I don't know, right? If it means would he support the protests against police violence? Yeah, most definitely. I mean, part of what the March in Washington was about was police violence. He talks about that in the speech that everybody only remembers "I Have a Dream" from. So yeah, I mean, he most definitely would have supported those protests, and I think if he was alive, he would really not. He would really not have the sort of mainstream political love that he gets, because he's dead and can this be like safely sanitized into this figure that's just about the initial protests in the South, and it's just about the content of the character line from the "I Have a Dream" speech, and really misses the sort of radical anti-militarist, anti-capitalist parts of his legacy.
Cherry?
Okay. This question, I'm sorry, but I don't often think what would MLK think, or what would Jesus do? Those are in the same boat to me. But if I have to, I would assume he's supportive of protests. I would think that he would empathize with riots, but he probably would not be on board with riots. My vague memory of history is he even was critical or reined in Malcolm X, and just on the substance of the people who go to these riots, he would probably be very disappointed in the lack of understanding that some of the people who do show up for BLM protests and stuff, the understanding that they have of the actual issues today.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to CTV.
Yeah, I say that if MLK was around today, he'd probably be marveled at the fact that every single major city across the United States, and probably most towns, right, have a street called MLK, right? That's probably the first thing he'd look at, right? And then whether or not he'd support the riots, he's going to look at the issue, right, and see whether or not the issue is going to be worth to be weighed in on. I think that considering the amount of steps that he had made back during his own lifetime, and seeing the Civil Rights Act be enacted in 1964, and the types of change that we saw that led to the time that I grew up in, which was frankly the 80s, right? I was born in 83, came up through there, and then the 90s. After that, racism was not a thing that was the topic of conversation, or it dominated the fucking media. It to me, Michael Jackson came up with a song that, it doesn't matter if you're black or white, right? So, maybe I'm just one of those rare fucking cases, you know what I mean? Where, I kind of took all the hype that was being put out around me, and I took it in, and I was like, hey, it doesn't fucking matter, right? Because you know what? And let's be honest, it's a CTV fucking classic right here, but it's all pink in the middle at the end of the day, especially now that I'm an adult, right? I mean, honestly, I'm married now, so that doesn't matter. I'm out of the game now so far as that's concerned. But back in the day, it's all pink in the middle. It doesn't fucking matter. So if I think that if MLK came back today and he saw what was going on, I think he'd probably end up telling a lot of people that, hey, guess what? We're where we need to. We're getting closer to where we need to be. We've got some fine tuning with the war on drugs to be made, but we're kind of where we need to be. So that'd be my take.
Next is going to be Preacher. Also, for MPU in advance, you being close personal friends with Dr. King during his lifetime cannot be used in the debate. That would be unfair. Okay, Preacher, go on.
Yeah, I actually did some research on this one, and I actually went back again and re-listened to the whole speech of "I Had a Dream," and he supported peaceful protests. He didn't support riots, but he said a biggest problem is questioning the cause of the riots. So he would definitely support okay, why are they rioting? If his legacy should be what it is, that he is a man of peaceful protest, of bringing attention to the cause. I know there's a lot of people that'll throw dirt saying connoitered with communists and stuff like that, and took money from communists. And you know what? As a man, he has his flaws. I would never hold that against him because what he did in life was so much greater than the flaws that he had. As far as BLM goes, no, I don't think he would support them. His thing was riots hurt the very community in which they're supposed to be lifting. If you look at the 2020 as a prime example, minority businesses owners assaulted, their businesses burned, minority black law enforcement officers insulted and assaulted. When we look at what he actually said in his speech, he said, "We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. We will never gain. We must rise to the logistic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militant which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to distrust all white people. For many of our white brethren, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood." Everything's happening right now is dividing black and white. I don't think he'd be supporting of that at all in any way, shape, or form. He wanted unity amongst the people. He fought against the government. He did not want the riots because he knew the people that suffered the most from the riots were the black community, and it still is that way. And I'll leave it at that.
Him.
Okay, so I know that one of the things that conservatives love about, the few things they like about MLK is that he said, don't judge a person, based off of their skin, judge them based off the merit of, who they are, which in an abstract sense is a good thing to do, right? The thing is, he also pushed for America to live up to its ideals, and those include removing unfair treatment of, people of color and minorities. Before I move on to the main part of my opening, Cherry said she doesn't think about what MLK would think on different topics, but I know for a fact, Cherry, that MLK would hate Nicki Minaj. Now, moving on.
Oh,
the
you
Los
are
Angeles,
done.
Excuse
Whoa,
me, this
whoa.
is my opening statement. Thank you.
That does not.
Well, excuse me, sorry. So the Los Angeles Times, they said, here's a quick little short paragraph about MLK. Okay, so in referring to BLM activists, they says that they are patriots and heroes because they're willing to risk their life and limb for the building up, not tearing down of America. Their disappointment with the nation, their rage against its lethal limits and fatal failures is but love turned inside out. Unlike white supremacists and domestic insurrectionists, they are trying to make America reaffirm its principles, its beliefs, its ambitions, and its fundamental commitment to democracy for all. As King reminded America on that sunny day in August 1963, these principles cannot be realized if black people do not continue to confront police misconduct and abuse. King understood then that the official power of the state to punish and murder black people was fatal for democracy. He also understood that too often law enforcement joined ranks with white supremacist forces to execute domestic terror that was protected by a badge and a gun. So I think he would have probably been he would have definitely hated Nicki Minaj, and he definitely would have been pro BLM.
Okay. Next is going to be MPU.
Now, let's see. Martin Luther King was a registered Republican. The concept of nonviolence for Mahatma Gandhi. He was a turn the other cheek guy, right? And he advocated strenuously against nonviolence. And as Preacher so eloquently presented, words from the man's mouth himself, from the I Have a Dream speech, was about wanting to have a society that looked beyond the skin color, looked to the content of one's character. And I know a lot of people on the left, a lot of people that are in BLM, Marxist ideology, Marcusian methodology to substitute race for class, because there's such a close hybrid within how many poor people in this country happen to actually be people of color. And we always want to talk about how we get past past the boundaries, and we say, well, we need an inflation-adjusted acres and a mule to be able to do the right thing or to have the same opportunity. But Martin Luther King didn't argue for any of that. Martin Luther King argued for just a level playing field. And we tried to provide a level playing field. Is it level? Does it need to be constantly milled? Do we need a better planer? Do we need to get the scientific community together to figure out how to make the planer better so that we can iterate to a better plane? Things better? Sure we do. That is the nature and the benefit of what this country is. Okay? But Martin Luther King, make no mistake about it, he was nonviolent. He would not have supported any communist ideology. And make no mistake about it, BLM, not the entire movement is Marxist, Leninist in its nature, and the owners of that said so. I'll save the rest for the open.
Rob Nor?
All right, thanks. MLK was a person, and the problem with people is that they're all shitty in some ways. I mean, it's just reality. And so it's difficult to know exactly what MLK would say today about a litany of things. But when we're looking at his legacy is the I Have a Dream speech. That is the legacy of MLK. And the most salient point in that is, in fact, his legacy, that we judge people based on the content of their character and not the color of their skin. All conversations of, but he also believed this and that and this and that to try to make people's political points, to me, is irrelevant. Just like if we would look at someone like, I think Ben wrote a book on Christopher Hitchens, like Mother Teresa is a great figure, right? Christopher Hitchens actually excoriated Mother Teresa, right? Like, so there's all sorts of things we could go back, and people want to denigrate Martin Luther King, saying that, perhaps he had extramarital affairs, or, I know there's allegations that he wrote about basically conversion therapy for gay people. None of that's relevant to what he would think today. That legacy of judge people by the content of their character, that's what's important. It is undoubtable at this point, although there are shitheads on all sides, that it is the right, and particularly people against the Democratic Party, that live by that message more today. The Democratic Party is almost solely focused on immutable characteristics and judging people based on their skin color. That's why they want to talk about people's privilege based on skin color. That's why they want to have a race to the bottom where they're always talking. We actually see in this administration giving out medications based on skin color, giving out monies to farmers based on skin color. So these things, in the spirit of what he was, would be rejected. As to BLM itself, I think, I'm just guessing, right? I think that Martin Luther King absolutely, just like me and millions of other people, would have seen significant problems in inner city black communities and would have been outraged by them and fought. And there are many people in BLM, like ground level people, that I think are great people that see those problems and have a right to speak up. And he would have been for that. I think he would have been against the violence, that we see that people that want to use that for violence and things like that. But at the end of the day, we can't really know what he would have said. He would have been living through our times, living through our media, living through our stories. So it could have changed somewhat what he was saying. But that idea that we need to remember is, he put it most succinctly and most eloquently. We judge by the content of your character, not the color of your skin. And I think that if we continue that mantra, he should rightfully be celebrated for saying that at a point in history where it was dangerous for him to do so. And that idea, I think, may have cost him his life. And it's reason to celebrate him, as far as I'm concerned, for the rest of history.
Okay, I'm going to throw it over to Rhizo.
For sure. So I'm going to talk about the latter half of the question about whether or not he would support BLM, and I'm going to distinguish between like the general civil rights movement that BLM is adjacent to, and BLM, the organization itself. So some of the things that they do, BLM is great, and it leads people to have some more help in their lives, some an ability to thrive a bit more, but their messaging is not meeting people who are outside the movement where they are to build bridges. They believe that any empathy shown towards those who don't support the cause is tantamount to capitulation of the oppressors. It's unironically, you're on our page or you're a white supremacist. And I don't think MLK believed that. I think MLK understood that people might have certain belief systems and ideas about reality that contribute to oppression, but ignorantly so, and did not condemn them for that. MLK was an amazing diplomat and was invited to have conversations with opposing figureheads who are along all lines of the issue. Modern day BLM adopts either a you're with us or you're the enemy mentality, And maybe to some extent that's true, but that's not how you build a movement. That's how you gain a bunch of angsty, indignant followers who don't know how to and aren't willing to sympathize with others and think that they don't have to because they're white supremacists by proxy. BLM today is the equivalent of a political Twitch streamer like Hassan, who makes you feel like you're part of a movement, but really you're just in a community of circle jerkers who have become prejudiced to anyone who doesn't hold their beliefs and doesn't know how to communicate to anyone who they believe contributes to their oppression. The cause is great, but the messaging of the movement is short-sighted and serves to further distance us from the egalitarian world that we want to build on the left. I don't expect a decentralized movement to fix these sort of issues, but when you have a central body, get your shit together and don't say that anybody who disagrees is a white supremacist, because that's what pushes people away from the left and BLM in general.
Okay, it is now open for open dialogue. Is there anyone in particular who wants to start us off? I'll throw it over to Ben because Ben has yet to do that.
Yeah, so I think saying that his legacy is just the "I have a dream" speech that he gave 4 years before he died is incredibly limited. I mean, like, what it ignores is what those last 4 years were about. He was literally assassinated when he was in Memphis to support striking workers. He had his main focus for years by that point had been, and certainly his main focus at the time that he died was trying to organize multiracial movement of the poor, because he thought that only massive economic redistribution could do anything about the lasting harms of Jim Crow, even after the laws had been abolished. And if you want to talk about his words, here are some of his other words. This is from a speech in 1966. You can't talk about solving the economic problem of the Negro without talking about billions of dollars. You can't talk about ending the slums without first saying that profit must be taken out of the slums. You're tampering and getting on dangerous ground with you're messing with folks then. You're messing with captains of industry. Now, this means we're treading difficult water because it means that we're saying that there's something wrong with capitalism. There must be a better distribution of wealth, and maybe America must move toward a democratic socialism. He said tons of stuff like that. Now, disagreeing with it is fine. The man is not infallible. I agree, but could disagree. But I think you can't claim that Martin Luther King didn't have those views. Because he absolutely did. He was way more socialist than BLM is. I agree he wouldn't have supported riots, although I also think that Preacher is right. He would have empathized with the cause of the riots. He said things like that. Riots are the language of the unheard. He also said at the Vietnam speech that he felt like he could no longer condemn the violence of poor people in ghettos until he had first condemned what he called the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, which is the U.S. government. So I think that, like, again, if you want to talk about his legacy, you can't just boil it down to that soundbite from 1964. I think you have to look at the whole thing. Finally, Mother Teresa was not at all a great person. Mother Teresa was a ghoul who palled around with the Duvalier dictatorship in Haiti and denied people proper anesthetics in Calcutta because she thought that suffering was good for the soul.
Hey Ben, why did you give
wrong about some things? He was totally right about that.
Why did you give Preacher credit for saying that MLK would empathize with riots if a black woman said it first? That seems pretty fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
If you use that phrase,
maybe you just didn't listen when I talked.
That might be it. Yeah.
I think
did she just say something I didn't hear?
Yeah, I get that.
And it's because your internet is so shitty. It's because your internet's shitty, Ben. That's why.
Hey, can I make a differentiation here? I want to differentiate here.
I'm sorry, did opening statements fucking just like crazily fucking imaginarily disappear? No,
yes.
You still have
it did end,
Wait,
CTV.
CTV.
Open the floor up.
CTV. It did end. It actually.
That was the second time
I
talking.
haven't been spoken yet.
Yes,
no,
did.
I know.
Yes,
no, I didn't.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Yeah, you did.
What did I say on the MLK? What did I say?
You went right after Cherry.
You said every street in America has a name, has a MLK street.
That's true. That's true. Look, my bad, y'all. We'll open the statements with, I'm drinking Coors Light tonight.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So, look,
so
I'm having a good time. Are y'all having a good time? Let's fucking go.
Okay. Wait. It's MPU's turn to speak. Okay? MPU.
Wait.
No.
I want to ask him something.
Yes.
What do you mean no? What do you mean no, preacher? What?
Well, because
I didn't say no.
I mean, more perfect union. Fuck. I'm okay. You know what? Fine. Never mind.
Actually,
Nobody gets to ask any
you
questions.
decide
Nobody gets
right.
to ask any questions. Fine. Sherry gets to go then. Okay. Never mind.
Yes.
MPU,
No.
please.
Yeah.
I just want to understand because I'm a little lost and I don't really know these labels very well. But you said BLM is communist, Marxist, and Leninist.
Submarine.
What?
Yes. Yeah. No. But
Can you
I'm
just-
a boomer, and I was on a submarine.
No, I didn't.
Those are my labels. I mean, what other labels are you talking about?
No, I'm talking about the labels, the political labels. You said BLM was communist, Marxist, and Leninist, and I'm just like a bit confused on what the fuck that means. Yeah, you said it was all three of those things, but like, why and how?
Oh, jeepers, he froze up.
Tough question.
He's really thinking about
Hey,
this
can
one.
I ask while he's waiting? Can I ask you,
This
Cherry?
Leninist. That's her words.
What's up, Rob?
What? Patrice Colliers. Sorry.
Sorry, more perfect union. You're breaking in and out. Like we.
Yeah, you completely froze up, MPU. You're gonna have to start over with your answer.
Well, okay. Hang on. I'm nothing wrong
You're
on
good
my
now.
end. So it
You're
must
good
be
now.
Dylan's. Am I good?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
Patrice, one of the founders of BLM, Patrice, her name is Patrice Colliers, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about
Okay.
BLM, like the
well, see, okay,
the
so this is it.
organization.
It's super interesting that you would actually present that, right? Because this is the argument the left presents back, is to say that there's a difference between BLM, quote unquote, the org, and BLM, the movement.
Do you
But
not
if
know
the
that there's a
movement-
difference?
But no.
Can I
You
jinx
can't-
you both on that?
can
Because you
say
both
that.
jinxed.
No. Okay. Can you please, everybody, please be quiet so I can hear. We haven't even
argument-
got through anything yet.
The argument, right? The argument to say is that everybody who says, "Do you support BLM?" Everybody thinks about BLM. Oh, sorry, a large chunk, maybe the majority of people in this country think about BLM as like Patrice Colliers, whatever her name is, right? The lady who is a Marxist Leninist who somehow found amazingly $3.4 million to buy fucking private housing. It's fantastic that she did that in a capitalist way. But then on the other hand, right, it's a bit hypocritical to turn around and say, well, we need the inflation adjusted 40 acres and a mule on the other side. And until we get it, we're going to just continue to churn the world, right? I disagree with anybody who creates the supposition to say that you can be pro BLM, the concept of that, you know what, every innocent life, every innocent black life matters. And anybody who loses their life, any form of violence is including cops or including in their own neighborhood, okay? Those lives matter. They're a part of the everybody's fucking life matters on the
I'm
earth.
so sorry I asked this question.
No.
I thought you were going to explain how it was communist, Marxist, and Leninist, but you're just going to
said
go
the
off on a
founder
tangent.
said it.
Because BLM is born out of the leadership of Patrice Cullors and her buddies, and they
not
were
the
all
movement.
trained. They are avowed Marxist Leninists, and they said we are trained Marxists, and then everybody else is basically ponied onto it. So you don't get to disassociate one fucking fact from the other. I'm sorry, you just simply can't fucking
No, listen.
do it.
Okay, if you think that you're answering my
nobody
question, you're
believes
not. Even if you're going to focus on the organization, you're still not answering my question. So I'm just going to give the fuck up. You talk.
Let me ask you a question. Let me see if I can dumb it down. No, let me see if I can dumb it down to the.
No, it's
to
all the
level
way
that
dumb.
need
It
to come
started dumb. It's got to go up from here.
His answer
so-
is the foundership say they're Marxist-Leninist. Is that not an
Apparently
answer?
that's
Okay,
not
but
enough.
where's the communism come in? Like none of it makes sense.
You're saying
Oh, I'm
Marxist-Leninism
sorry.
isn't communism? Is that your argument?
I'm assuming that they're different things. Are they
You're
not
assuming.
different?
They're
You don't
very
know?
similar. They're very similar. But I think can I ask, like, okay, let's say it
Preacher,
is
you'll be next.
okay, so I want to say you guys are making it sound like MLK would be so anti-communist and stuff. But a lot of what he said, as Ben brought up, seems to be that he recognized that there was a massive gap in wealth inequality that was the cause of a lot of the problems in these communities. He said that we
You're
all.
totally
This
wrong.
is a quote.
You're totally
this
wrong.
is a quote. Wait,
You
let
are
me quote
totally
him.
wrong.
Let him
Can I
finish.
quote
Let's
him or
let him
no?
finish.
Well,
Let's let
but
him
he
finish.
wasn't right because
Well, let's let him finish. Let's
income
let him finish.
inequality didn't actually.
MPU, shut the fuck up.
Continue.
Wait, MPU.
Continue. No, don't
And
worry. He's
whether
muted. Continue.
Okay, but whether you agree with his analysis or not, I'm just telling you what he would have probably his analysis. I'm not telling you whether it's right or wrong. His prescriptions are right or wrong. What I'm saying is his quote is, "We all too often have socialism for the rich and rugged free market capitalism for the poor." This sounds to me like someone who would be advocating for redistribution of wealth and a lot of these lefty positions that you guys would consider communist. I don't think that his views are in conflict with the label that you're putting on him.
Okay, so he's injecting something I got to respond to. Income inequality. Okay, since 1940, between 1940 and 1980, between all fucking races in this country was pretty fucking consistent. Meaning there wasn't that much income inequality. Now, at the very top, where you talk about like the ultra rich, the difference between the ultra rich and the ultra poor was pretty low. I mean, that was big there, but there were very few fucking people, right? The vast majority, and this is stuff that's actually available on the fucking online, simple Google search, right? You can look at it and you can see that it isn't until after the Great Society is passed in 1965 and about 12 to 15 years later that you begin to see the income inequality begin to accelerate or gap out between whites and blacks in this country. So you can't say that he might have seen that, but also he was exposed to people like Herbert Marcuse at the time, people from the Frankfurt School and stuff like that, where they talked about like the need to sort of bring everybody out and create this instance where the class warfare, and then they had to stack on top of it the element of race, so that they could hopefully get enough people to actually resist and overthrow a capitalist system. So the fact that King was a contemporary, meaning he lived in the same time frame, right, as Herbert Marcuse and people like that, where those things were being discussed because there was the problem with the Vietnam War and everything else. These were problems that were causing, these were problems that people were beginning to adopt into their own philosophies to do stuff. Martin Luther King was not a fucking socialist. He actually rejected commentary. He rejected meetings to meet with fucking Castro, okay?
Why does
who
cares about if he met with Castro or not?
Yeah,
because
meeting with Castro doesn't make you not a socialist. We both read quotes where he
Can I hop in here for a moment, please?
Okay, one second. Okay, so we're gonna
Rejected the meeting with Castro.
Okay, so we're gonna throw it over to Preacher. Preacher's been waiting for a while.
Just 2 points I want to make. One was that I want to separate myself from BLM, the corporate organization, and the little branch movements, because in my hometown, it's a very small town in Northeast Pennsylvania. They did a BLM get together. I wouldn't even call it a protest. It was a get together. We have a small Central Park. They walked around the outside with their signs. It was black and whites walking around with their signs. Martin Luther King would have been right in with that because they were very peaceful. I knew many of the speakers that got up there and speak, and they did a very great job. He would have gotten down with that. He would not get down with the big movements that turned into riots. Now, when it comes to the communist part or the socialist part, I will say that the FBI did run wiretaps and surveillance on him, and he did actually, I don't know if he actually worked with it. He did work with at least one communist named Stanley David Levinson, who was a member of a Communist Party of the United States of America, who actually, from 57 to 58, gave MLK Jr. $10,000 in gifts. I mean, he has worked with communists. He did believe in some communism. I'm not saying that he would fully support everything. I'm just saying, like, in his words, he has spoken of it. In his actions, he has been parts of it, or at least received gifts from it. So we can't completely rule that out. But I think if he was here today, he would say, okay, Barack Obama as president, black people as CEOs and professors and judges. He'd say, you know what? My movement did some shit. I hope this keeps going like this. I'll leave it at that.
Rob?
Okay, so if I could try to kind of put this together. Like I don't think just because MLK didn't meet with Castro, that means he wasn't a socialist. I don't think we should judge him by the company he kept. I think we should judge him by the ideas and the writings that he espoused. And I think that Ben and Heem are right, that regardless of how we want to deem or, define socialism or communism, it's quite clear that MLK seemed to be pushing for some sort of wealth redistribution policies, which we say is on the vein of socialism. A reason that he wouldn't have meant for Castro is literally he was constantly fighting a Red Scare that was occurring at the time where the FBI was accusing him and others were accusing him of being a secret communist. So of course he's not going to meet with Castro, because even if he was a communist, which I'm not saying I have proof he was a full-blown communist, but even if he was, it's clear that his big issue was sort of racial issues in the United States. So he doesn't want to confound that by having people that might hate communism allow the FBI to deal with them. But my point is this, so that's kind of to agree with Heem and Ben. My point is, I don't think that we have the same interpretation of what the word legacy means, which is what the question was. And the legacy he has is that idea of judging people based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. I don't understand what points we try to get from going, oh, and also he was a socialist. Okay. That doesn't mean he was right about socialism. His legacy is the statement that he made and the idea that we should judge people not by immutable characteristics, but by the content that they do, the actions that they do. And that's what's important. Just because he was a socialist, what's the implication here? Oh, and he was a socialist, which much proved that socialism's good too. No, it doesn't prove that whatsoever. Any more than people that want to attack MLK will start talking about, well, recordings show that he possibly beat his wife, and recordings show that he cheated on his wife. And we see his writings that he supported basically conversion therapy for LGBT people. Like, all of that's irrelevant to that message of judge people based on the content of their character. And so that's what I'm talking about, which we see right now. The Democratic Party is antithetical to that. It constantly judges people based on the color of their skin and not the content of their character. And the last thing I'll say real quick is I just don't know what MLK would have been like today. Who knows? But I can say that legacy portion of him, just like the legacy of Lincoln is kind of, fighting a war to end slavery. It doesn't matter. All these people are fallible, but that legacy, that symbol is what's important. And I know that symbol would actually agree with a lot of what Rhizome was talking about, is the way that BLM was ran and the way that it was pushed, this us versus them mentality. It's not just a moral mistake against that, but it's a huge fucking strategic mistake. They should
Rob.
take allies anywhere they can.
Hey, Rob, I think you said this a couple times, and I'm just confused why. You say, the Democrats are, hyper-focused on, race and stuff like that. Do you think, we can actually address race inequality without, acknowledging race?
Yes.
Wait,
I
how?
think you could do it in not acknowledging race in the way that the Democrats are, that it's the universal characteristic that we need to look at first. By having laws that, understanding that history is rife with all sorts of discrimination in our country and around the world for all sorts of populations based on race, gender, etc. But the best we could do moving forward is try to be as racially blind and as sexual orientation blind and as sex blind as possible when passing laws through the government. If we stop treating black people as inferior,
how do you?
Let me finish. If we stop treating black people as monolithic and inferior and give them the same opportunities as everyone else and have the laws be equal across that, we might just see that the people, particularly white liberals, that are trying to treat them like children will be outworked and outclassed by those same black people, which is probably one of the reasons that they constantly want to treat them like children.
So do you think when you put black people who have been held back for a long time in the same positions as white people, that maybe you're setting them up for failure without giving them additional steps to catch them up forward?
No, because that refers to black people as monolithic. For example, what additional steps would you provide?
Wait, why is that monolithic?
Because you just said, well, black people that are behind white people because how they've been treated. So, for example, is Barack Obama behind me?
No, I didn't.
We shouldn't have race-based policies. For example, if there's two people, one named Will who's white and one named Bob who's black, and they're both born in the same hospital next to each other to single mothers who both make $10,000 a year, why would we say, but the ancestors of Will who's white had it better, so we need to have special programs to help Bob that's black? If we help people based on need, fine, help them based on need. If helping people based on need disproportionately helps black people, fine, I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem is the racial focus of it.
Again,
Rob is 100% correct. Rob is 100% correct here, right?
No,
it isn't.
not.
It isn't. No, he is. If you sit back and you target things that are based on race, then you are expressly violating
If
the 14th Amendment.
inequality is based on race, you can't actually target it unless you base it on race.
No, you're making an argument for reparations. You're saying that historical
reparations.
You didn't, but that's a part of the typical argument for it, Sherry.
You legitimately made a case for reparations because you said if somebody
action,
right,
affirmative action doesn't necessarily,
or providing education for minorities in a way that they didn't get before, providing food, providing shelter.
All those things are different from what we're currently talking about, though.
Okay, so we're gonna have Preacher finish, and then I'm gonna have Cherry respond after that. Okay.
I mean, more perfect union.
Sorry, I'm delirious.
Okay, so who's speaking, me or Cherry?
You, and then Cherry.
Okay, so the argument, right? The argument to say that I hear this a lot on the left. I hear people like Joe Lewis talk about it and stuff like that. They say that really the only way forward is to get the inflation adjusted 40 acres and a mule, because if you start out 30 years ago behind the white guy, and the white guy's got a 30-year head start, he's always going to be 30 years ahead of you. And that's just absolutely wrong. We have myriad examples of people who are able to get ahead because they work harder, because they recognize that they can work this, whatever the systems are, in order to do that, right? Heem is a partner. I'm not a partner. I'm a 10 fucking viewer Andy, right? Am I sitting back and calling racism because Heem has fucking got a partnership and I don't? I don't think CTV's doing it. CTV's busting his ass trying to figure out how to become a fucking partner, because we looked at...
It's true. I got partnered because I'm Persian.
Stop.
Okay, Heem got partnered and you're not partnered. I guess racism doesn't exist.
Okay, can we please... Okay,
see, this is the argument that you make. You say that simply because you can show an example where people can actually get ahead without having to rely on the trope that society is perpetually racist, and the only thing you can do to make it better is somehow fucking take a massive amount of wealth from somebody who's earned it and give it to people who didn't earn it, means that they will somehow be able to do something well with it. No, the best way forward is to simply say, we will do better to try to level not outcomes, but level opportunities so people can make the most of those opportunities. And when we sit back and we say that's not good enough, we somehow now have to put more money into this of something. You basically create a victim class mentality that fails to understand the fact that if people feel like they are a victim, they will stop trying as hard as the people who don't believe that they're a victim, yet they don't like their circumstances, and they say, well, if I try harder, I might be able to make it forward. And I disagree mightily. And I realize I'm a white fucking boomer, okay, from the time of Martin Luther King, which I'm the only fucking person on his panel who fucking knows anything about it based on age, right? 4 years old when the man was killed. Okay, but
you must have known a lot at 4 years old.
I knew a lot. I knew a lot more than you knew. I knew a lot more than you knew in 1960.
True, I was not
I'll tell you that.
4 when MLK was around.
Cherry?
I'm just going to go and reiterate my point. If there is race inequality, you cannot address it without looking at race.
That's just real quick. This is getting off topic. I'll just say this real quick. If there's race inequality, what do you mean by inequality? Like inequality of opportunity, inequality of finance, stuff like that? Is that what you mean?
There's so many issues you can look at. I'm just trying to summarize it. I don't feel like diving into every topic, with education, with housing,
okay. So then what we would
with
do
job
is,
security.
Right. So the problem's not race. The problem is there are certain people that lack opportunities in those things. Money, opportunity, housing.
No. There is also income inequality. But we don't have to put these two together all the time. Sometimes you can just talk about race inequality.
Right.
That's
so
okay.
Anyways, when we're talking about those inequalities, we're talking about specific things, lack of housing, income, things like that. If it's true true that there is inequality amongst that, but the problem we're trying to solve is the actual thing. So like housing access or income. Then we help the people based on need, not based on race. And if it's true that there's inequality based on race, then helping based on need would still disproportionately help those races. But when you make it just about race, you end up, like for example, there was this bill that was pushed by the Democrats, right, that gave farmers, poor farmers during the pandemic, access to money, right? Now, that money was based on if you were a poor black farmer. Now, why would you make it about poor black farmers instead of just saying poor farmers? And if it's true that 95% of the poor farmers were black, then they would have still got 95% of the money. But what you do is you isolate the white people that would be poor farmers that maybe would have otherwise got that money based on need, and you say, fuck you, you're the wrong skin color. And that makes no sense and is racist.
So I think you can address race inequality and income inequality. I don't think you have to pick and choose. But
what is race inequality?
You have to. So
it is not the purview of the government to address income inequality. That is not that is not what our Constitution was set up to do. Our Constitution
did you say that the government does not address income inequality?
It's not the purview of the federal government to address income inequality. No, it is not. It is not. You don't fucking know what you're talking about. Okay, you have no fucking clue what you're talking about, because the Constitution was not established to ensure that the government ensured an equal fucking financial outcome to anybody.
I can't even take you seriously.
Okay.
Well, I don't give a fuck.
Okay, well,
you're not a fucking serious person if you're discounting what I'm saying.
Okay,
guys, Dylan is talking.
Thank you, Rizo. Before this spirals out, I want to throw it over to Ben, who raised his hand earlier. Rob, did you raise your hand earlier, or I couldn't?
I did not. I would like to hear from other people, so I'm out.
Okay, sorry, I'm delirious. Ben?
Yeah. So I guess I don't. Sure, shouldn't you judge people by the content of character? Of course you should, but how you should judge people as individuals is a little bit of a different question from whether, for example, affirmative action programs are justified to rectify the results of past racial discrimination. By the way, Martin Luther King explicitly supported affirmative action. There's a 1965, Alex Haley interviewed him for Playboy, asked, do you feel it's fair to request a multi-billion-dollar program of preferential treatment for the Negro or any other minority group? King says, I do indeed. Can any fair-minded citizen deny the Negro has been deprived? You people reflect that for 2 centuries the Negro was enslaved and robbed of any wages, et cetera, et cetera. And he goes on in this vein. Now, that doesn't mean you have to agree with it just because he thought it. I don't think anybody has said that. In fact, earlier I explicitly said the opposite. I said that, it's fine to disagree. Let's just not pretend that the man's politics can be boiled down to that one soundbite that people selectively remember.
If I can real quick,
I have a dream speech.
If we're talking about legacy, though, right? That's the part that I'm disagreeing with you. But I agree. He certainly said all of us, like, we're in a bad situation. We're streamers on Twitch right now. Imagine when we die, the shit people will dredge up we said. But when we're talking about legacy, that to me is the legacy. The I have a dream speech, is it not?
Well, I mean, if by legacy you mean what's the 10 seconds that most people remember, then sure, that's his legacy.
I think when you say legacy,
since part of the question was about what he would have thought about contemporary political issues like BLM. So I was reading legacy in a broader way.
Okay.
If you just want to mean like most people who don't know very much about him, what do they know? Is it that? Then yeah, sure, I agree with that. That's fine. I would also just point out, I mean, we could argue about solutions, and I agree for a lot of things, like universal programs are actually, that would disproportionately benefit non-white people, but still would be universal are definitely the best way to go. But I think it's a little disingenuous to just talk about Barack Obama or black CEOs as if that meant that there was no overall gap, right? I mean, the black poverty rate is 2.5 times the white poverty rate, and that seems like that seems like a more significant. That seems more significant than the existence of a few black faces in high places. As far as equality of opportunity, I mean, I would argue that you can't separate equality of opportunity from equality of outcome. Given massive enough inequality as an outcome, there is no meaningful equality of opportunity because one generation's outcomes are the next generation's opportunities. And as far as the Constitution goes, the Supreme Court has disagreed that it's outside of the purview of the federal government to enact programs to alleviate economic problems since at least the 1930s. Whatever. I'll take them.
You're mischaracterizing
over MTU on that.
Okay, you're mischaracterizing what I said. I said it is not the purview of the federal government to ensure financial outcomes. Okay, it doesn't mean that the Congress can't make laws, as Rob pointed out, that you can't make laws that benefit like certain economic sectors of the economy who might actually happen to be like people of color, right? Minorities, and there's no question that minorities were harmed by a lot of the policies of democratic institutions for the last 150 fucking years since the Civil War, right? The Jim Crow, Southern fucking policy, right? All of the governors in the South that were against fucking equality were Southern fucking Democrats, right? They were. That's the way. That's exactly what it fucking was.
Okay, it wasn't. I just don't understand how this is relevant.
Hang on.
I feel like the two of you are talking past each other.
Party? I hate the Democrats. I
feel like the both of you are talking past each other right now.
Ben, I wanted to ask you something real quick. Are you for equality of outcome?
No, I'm not.
I think you can't have. I think perfect equality of outcome. Everybody has the same number of dollars in their bank account. No, you don't need that. But I think that I don't think you can have dramatic inequalities of outcome and still have meaningful equality of opportunity.
And let me ask you this: do you think that it's not just a governmental goal to push that, but we as individuals should strive for that as well?
I think that as individuals, I think that as an individual, in terms of voting, I think in terms of doing things like organizing unions, I don't think individual consumption or giving, how you spend your consumer dollars or giving to charity.
No. I mean, if you're in a position to help through some action of your own equalize outcomes, do you think that's the moral thing to do?
What do you mean by equalize outcomes there?
Well, you tell me. You say you're for equalizing.
Well, no, but I mean,
hang on a second. Let me ask the question a different way, Rob.
Okay.
Do you think that it's no? I'm going to ask it a different way.
No, he's
ask it a different way.
Well, it doesn't matter because he was asked a question, so he can respond to it if he wants to.
Yeah, I would like to respond to it. So okay, I think that there's nothing as an individual that you could do. I mean, maybe if you're Jeff Bezos, you can turn Amazon into a worker co-op or something. That would do a lot. I think
that's not true. For example, you're a professor. There's a lack of black professors. Resign.
I think there's okay. I think that there's nothing as an individual you could do to change the overall patterns in society. Now, if there are things that you could do to help people out of compassion, that's fine. You have a reason to do that morally, but that's just a different thing from making the institutions of society more equal and the overall pattern of distribution of wealth more equal. And I think moralizing about individuals is kind of beside the point.
Well, that's
so your argument.
But that's not going to get it done.
It's fair to say that in your argument
of worker organizing.
That's not specifically what MPU was arguing for, though.
That's not. All the stuff.
No, let me argue my point.
That's a goofy distraction.
It's not. Individual responsibility is important, and the people that want to rely on total government intervention
really? Hold on. Please, look, I've been the quietest of anybody on this whole fucking panel all fucking night. Mm-hmm. All fucking night.
Yeah,
right?
Look, let's not derail right now.
I'm not trying to derail, but what's been happening is that Ben and MPU are talking past each other. Okay? Doesn't matter. Go ahead.
That's going to be the end of tonight's show. We're going to end tonight's show there. So everybody's going to get 30 seconds to give their last thoughts. We're going to start with MPU.
Yeah, so the whole argument here is whether or not Martin Luther King would have supported Black Lives Matter. I don't think he would have. He was a nonviolent person. And arguments to the contrary that say that we can somehow put a magic hat on him and infer that 40 or 50 or 60 years worth of history that has elapsed since his passing somehow make him think differently. I think it maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. We can't specifically state what that is, but what he was is that he was a student of nonviolent resistance. And I think that he, even though he thought that there were problems or things that could have been resolved for like social democratic policies, he had no ability, again, those 60 years that the Great Society existed, where there was basically none, post-World War II, no inequality amongst the races until 1980. There was massive, becomes massive inequality. It's because of the policies that basically segregated, packed minorities into communities, and then policies in terms of like the way we did criminal justice and stuff like that, and we separated families, and then that created this generational fucking poverty problem. And you cannot undo that by giving people a shitload of money all the time.
Okay, you
Sorry.
shout yourself out.
I'm the more perfect union. I am, with all due respect to CTV, I am the best looking conservative streamer on Twitch. Y'all look me up. The more perfect union. Blah 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 blah.
Nice, I'm gonna throw it over to Rob.
Okay, just
I'm
on
gonna
this
throw it over
topic.
to Rob now. Rob's a good guy.
Thanks. I'll just say this real quick. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. Like that conversation we're had there at the end, that's a total aside. You know, I stand by my opening statement. I think the legacy is judge people by the content of their character. I actually thought the person I wanted to hear the most from on this was Rhizome. I thought that his opening statement was the most interesting, and I agree with it a lot. Though I do understand people having the absolute right to be furious about the treatment of inner city black people. I think the way that movement has gone and how they've alienated people, and we see a greater movement in many groups, particularly on the left, that want to racialize and look at people based solely on the content of their character and say they can't be allies, they can't do this, they can't do that based on their skin color, and I think that's a huge mistake. The last thing I'll say is just, Dylan, I sincerely hope you start feeling better from COVID. It sucks, man.
Thank you. I'm gonna throw it over to Rhizome.
Sure, yeah.
Before Rhizome,
I didn't speak.
Before you speak, I want to say that I too wish that Dylan is feeling better soon. CTV gets pissed off, but no, seriously, I believe in your health, buddy. So, Rhizome, back to you, bro.
Well, thank you, MPU. Anyways, I stayed a little bit quiet there because I feel like I don't really have a solid understanding of what MLK's legacy is today or anything like that, so I didn't really feel comfortable speaking up. But I agree with Rob in general. I think that we just get too in our own echo chambers. We need to focus on building bridges. We need to listen to people, why they think the way that they do. I think we need to be focused on trying to build a more egalitarian society, not necessarily focused on equality of outcomes, but equality of opportunity. I don't feel the same as Rob and MPU might about the Democratic Party. I do agree that we should focus less on those things, but when, protected classes affect material reality, I think it is something that we need to check out and see what's going on there and try to fix for. But once we live in a world where, the color of your skin doesn't determine, what social bracket you might end up in at birth, then we can have that conversation. So that's about it.
Next is going to be Preacher.
Yeah, I when I think of a person's legacy, I think when their name is mentioned, what do you think? And yeah, I do believe, rightfully so, he is that the "I Have a Dream" speech is probably the greatest part of his legacy. Of course, we can look back in his past, dig up dirt about prostitutes or whatever. That's not his legacy. His legacy is the movement he created, the work that he did. If he was here today, maybe I could be wrong on how he would be with BLM. I think he would look around and see that, you know what, a lot has been accomplished in his name and from his work, but there's also still more to go, especially when we look at the opportunities of the inner city youth. There's still more work to be done. I'm sure he would agree with that, but I'm pretty sure he would still be marching peacefully and not condoning the riots. So I'll leave it at that.
Where can people find you?
Oh, Preacher570 here on Twitch and everywhere else, TikTok, Twitter, all that crap.
Wonderful.
Happy stuff.
Him?
Okay. So I want to say again, I think I'm gonna go on a strong stance and say I think MLK would have probably broadly supported BLM. Now, would he have probably been against the rioting? Yeah, but in the same way that a lot of us progressives were against the rioting but understood BLM. I don't think that it's got to be like you can if you don't condone rioting that you know necessarily have to uh not condone BLM as well. You can have both of those positions. It seemed like he had that position when he was around, that he was anti-rioting but was very sympathetic to the reason, right? And I brought up the quote, or the quote was brought up before, that like he understands why there's rioting. It's because of the income inequalities and so on and so forth. And then one thing I want to say quickly is that I think that there's when we're talking about the equality of opportunity and outcome, I think there's a place here for people on the left to kind of understand that, and I think this is actually something that can bring all of us together, maybe, that there is something to be said for individuals to have to overcome the challenges that they've been posed with. The advice I would give to an individual that's down and out in society or comes from a lower socioeconomic background is, listen, you're going to have to bust your ass to try to overcome your shitty hand that you were dealt. But at the same time, we can recognize that from a societal level, we can have a more broad analysis and say that like there are systemic things that are preventing people and making it harder for people. So I don't think that it has to be one or the other. Again, you can have both of these positions. The advice I would give to an individual is you're gonna have to bust your ass to try to get places in this life. I'm Heem. You can find me on Twitch. I stream early mornings if you're looking for something to watch while you're having your coffee, and you can catch me on YouTube, where I recently crossed 10,000 subscribers, and I just started a second channel where I'll be doing normie content. Dylan, feel better, buddy.
I appreciate it. I'm gonna throw it over to CTV.
I jumped in last minute. Chat, you know what I've been doing this whole time. First time I decided to speak, when people are talking past each other to try to clarify, this happens. So what I will say is that we're pretty close to making partner. I'm hope that we get there. If we don't, it's no skin off my back, right? It kind of is what it is. With all of that said, CTV out.
Okay, I'm gonna throw it over to. Okay, then I'm gonna throw it over to Cherry.
I think Martin Luther King would have supported Black Lives Matter, the movement. I think he would have empathized with riots, but I don't think he would have supported them. And I think he would have spoken out against violence. All in all, I still just don't think you can address race inequality without addressing race. Also, you can find me on twitch.tv/cherry.
Wonderful. And Ben Burgess.
Yeah, those were some great points that Preacher just made just now. Okay, so I think that stupid joke. Anyway, I think that that I don't know why anybody's talking about riots when the question is about BLM. Supporting BLM and supporting riots are different questions. In fact, I think it's a little ironic because one of the big accusations made against Martin Luther King was that he was actually for riots, even though he said he was against it. So I think we could make a distinction between BLM protests and riots. I think that if legacy means not just what soundbite to people who don't know very much about the question know, but what was left behind by the person, their writings, their speeches, their ideas, that's worth valuing and paying attention to, then yes, there is a lot more beyond that soundbite. And I also happen to think he was right about an awful lot of it. All right. Give them an argument on YouTube. You can read my stuff at Jacobin. You can buy this book, Christopher Hitchens, what he got right, how he went wrong, and why he still matters. And yeah, I don't know. I hope I didn't give you COVID, Dylan. That would suck.
Yeah, I hope that isn't the case either. I think it was just infrared using sneaky debate tactics. But I appreciate everybody coming out and spending their Friday with me. Y'all have a good one, okay?